So really the heartbeat of racism itself has always been denial. And the sound of that heartbeat has always been, I'm not racist. And so what I'm trying to do with my work is to really get Americans to eliminate the concept of not racist from their vocabulary and realize we're either being racist or anti-racist. We're either expressing ideas that suggest certain racial groups are better or worse than others, superior or inferior than others. We're either being racist or we're being anti-racist. We're expressing notions that the racial groups are equals, despite any cultural and ethnic differences. We're either supporting policies that are leading to racial inequities and injustice, like we saw in Louisville, where Breonna Taylor was murdered, or we're supporting policies and pushing policies that are leading to justice and equity for all. And so I think we should be very clear about whether we're expressing racist ideas, about whether we're supporting racist policies, and admit when we are. Because to be anti-racist is to admit when we expressed a racist idea, is to say, you know what? When I was doing that in Central Park, I was indeed being racist, but I'm gonna change. I'm gonna strive to be anti-racist. And to be racist is to constantly deny the racial inequities that pervade American society, to constantly deny the racist ideas that pervade American minds. And so I want to build a just and equitable society. And the only way we're gonna even begin that process is if we admit our racism and start building an anti-racist world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. You know, your book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, has become a bestseller in light of what's been happening. And you've been speaking a bit to, you know, the ways in which anti-racism and racism are the only two polar opposite ways to hold a view on racism. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about what the basic tenets of anti-racism are for people who aren't as familiar with it in terms of how they can be anti-racist.
Sure. And so I mentioned in my talk that the heartbeat of racism is denial. And really the heartbeat of anti-racism is confession, is the recognition that to grow up in this society is to literally, at some point in our lives, probably internalize ideas that are racist, ideas that suggest certain racial groups are better or worse than others. And because we believe in racial hierarchy, because Americans have been systematically taught that Black people are more dangerous, that Black people are more criminal-like, when we live in a society where Black people are 40% of the national incarcerated population, that's gonna seem normal to people. When we live in a society, in a city like Minneapolis, where Black people are 20% of the population, but more than 60% of the people being subjected to police shootings, it's gonna seem normal. And so to be anti-racist is to believe that there's nothing wrong or inferior about Black people or any other racial group. There's nothing dangerous about Black people or any other racial group. And so when we see these racial disparities all around us, we see them as abnormal. And then we start to figure out, okay, what policies are behind so many Black people being killed by police? What policies are behind so many Latinx people being disproportionately infected with COVID? How can I be a part of the struggle to upend those policies and replace them with more anti-racist policies?
And so it sounds like you do make that distinction then between not racist and anti-racist. And I guess, could you talk a little bit more about that and break that down? What is the difference between the two?
In the most simplest way, a not racist is a racist who is in denial. And an anti-racist is someone who is willing to admit the times in which they're being racist and who is willing to recognize the inequities and the problems of racial problems of our society, and who is willing to challenge those racial inequities by challenging policy. And so I'm saying this because literally slaveholders, slave traders, imagine that their ideas in our terms were not racist. They would say things like Black people are the cursed descendants of Ham, and they're cursed forever into enslavement. This isn't, I'm not racist. This is God's law. They would say things like, you know, based on science, based on ethnology, based on natural history, Black people by nature are predisposed to slavery and servility. This is nature's law. I'm not racist. I'm actually doing what nature said I'm supposed to be doing. And so this construct of being not racist and denying one's racism goes all the way back to the origins of this country.
Yeah. And why do you think it has been so hard for some people now to still accept that neutrality is not enough when it comes to racism?
I think because it takes a lot of work to be anti-racist. It takes, you have to be very vulnerable, right? You have to be willing to admit that you were wrong. You have to be willing to admit that if you have more, if you're white, for instance, and you have more, it may not be because you are more. You have to admit that, yeah, you've worked hard potentially in your life, but you've also had certain advantages which provided you with opportunities that other people did not have. You have to admit those things. And it's very difficult for people to be publicly and even privately self-critical. I think it's also the case of, and I should have probably led with this, how people define racist. And so people tend to define racist as like a fixed category, as an identity. This is essential to who a person is. It is someone becomes a racist. And so therefore, and then they also connect a racist with a bad, evil person. They connect a racist with a Ku Klux Klansman or woman. They're like, I'm not in the Ku Klux Klan. I'm not a bad person. And I've done good things in my life. I've done good things to people of color. And so therefore, I can't be racist. I'm not that. That's not my identity, but that's actually not how we should be defining racist. Racist is a descriptive term. It describes what a person is saying or doing in any given moment. And so when a person in one moment is expressing a racist idea, in that moment, they're being racist when they're saying Black people are lazy. If in the very next moment, they're appreciating the cultures of Native people, they're being anti-racist.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Keep your eyes on the road ahead. But if you're feeling lost in the night, it's okay to cry. Just as long as you hold your head. 'Cause we're on our way to better. Better's ahead. Better's ahead. It gets worse before it gets better. But better's ahead. Better's ahead. Better days coming. Better days coming. Better days, better days. Better days coming. I know you've been kicked down, slept on, let down, take on, waited for too long for something to lean on. You feel weak, just be strong, deep breath, stay calm. If you just press on, press on, press on, you gon' see there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Keep your eyes on the road ahead. And if you're feeling lost in the night, it's okay to cry. Just as long as you hold your head. 'Cause we're on our way to better. Don't dim yours for no one. Keep going higher, 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 higher. Better days, better days. Coming. Better days, better days. Coming. Better days, better days. Coming. Better days, better days. I know better days are coming.
So good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to see the participant count tick up. I'm happy to kind of get myself centered, whether it's the music or the piece that we just saw. We are excited to be underway of yet another Racial Justice Summit. I cannot tell you how proud I am of this department. I find myself in spaces all the time, particularly lately related to our racial justice work and anti-racist strategies. And, DCF Connecticut continues to be lifted up as one of those places who kind of understands the work that needs to be put in to get to this kind of reckoning that the world is, or at least America is undergoing right now. And that, from a systemic perspective, we're off and running, right? And I speak with pride often of the work that happens here, but pride doesn't change outcomes. Pride does not change outcomes for kids and families. And, as we sit here today, really sharing where we have been in the last year, sharing where our change initiatives are, sharing what we think is ahead for us in the next year, there is the trial that's underway of former police officer Derek Chauvin and for the murder of George Floyd. We know here in Connecticut that racism, racist behavior, and institutional and structural racism did not start with George Floyd's murder, yet that has become the rallying cry across the country. And everybody kind of sits with their eyes wide open, looking at this trial to determine what will be the outcome. The defense's strategy seems to be the officer did what he was trained to do. We cannot continue to do what we have been trained and accustomed to do in child welfare. We in Connecticut DCF have understood that structurally child welfare over the years has been constructed in a way that has perpetuated marginalization and oppression. And because we have taken a stand in the seats that we sit of leadership, we recognize that we have a chance and we have a choice to change the way people are trained, to change the way people do their work on a day in and day out basis, to change the way we understand how we can keep children safe by lifting up their parents and supporting their communities, by demanding equity across all of our spaces and the things that we touch. A year ago, we sat with Dr. Reginald Eady. He was relatively new to Connecticut, but has been propelled into the forefront of this fight against COVID-19. He introduced us to the term, this imperfect storm that we find ourselves in, of racial unrest, COVID-19, and economic devastation of our communities. We have a chance to change things structurally because of this confluence of this imperfect storm. And where we are as a system demand that we take action. If you were listening as you all were signing in, there was a piece that kind of compared being not racist to anti-racist. And as he was talking, I was thinking, being not racist is kind of passive. Being anti-racist is active. And at Connecticut DCF, we are active. We are actively pushing against the structures that have kind of shaped us for years. So, I, along with you, am super excited to hear what has been happening across the board in every single space that we touch. I'm happy to see where our change initiatives have evolved to. I'm happy to see, as we refine and design and figure out the metrics and determine which of these change initiatives will be scaled up. I'm happy to see the partnerships across divisions, across offices and regions, across super regions and facilities, across divisions and offices. I'm happy to see your partnerships with each other. No one of us knows this and can do this all alone. And because we know that we can't do it alone, we often extend thanks to our partners outside of the department. Of course, we have our racial justice tri-chairs that work tirelessly around the clock to make sure that we have what we need. So I thank you to Deputy Commissioner Jody Hill-Lilly as the executive sponsor, and our three dynamic tri-chairs, and Jenna Ghosty, Tina Jefferson, and Monica Rams, who really want to make sure that not only the racial justice work group, who are our champions, but the leaders of this department have what they need to really advance this work. I'd like to also thank our external partners who work with us side by side. Susan Riley of Casey Family Programs is here with us today. We also have another consultant joining us here today, and that's Dr. Maisa Akbar. She has authored a few books, and I jokingly said to her that I read Urban Trauma in a couple of days of a vacation when we could actually go on vacation, but I confessed to her that I left Urban Trauma in the airport on purpose because I wanted somebody else to be able to pick it up and read it. And I hope that next person picks it up and reads it and leaves it for someone else to pick it up and read it. And if you haven't, please pick it up and read it, because understanding the size of Connecticut and the work that we do and the various communities that we serve, it becomes another tool in your toolbox, along with her most recent piece, Beyond Ally, which kind of talks about allyship of the different layers and different lanes that we find ourselves in, and understanding how to be anti-racist in this climate. So she's doing some consulting work with us. We also have joining us at some point this morning Julie Springwater and Maria Gagnon from the New England Coalition of Commissioners and Directors of Child Welfare. They are leading the work in New England in this space, and share some of these responsibilities with our Jen. So they will be joining us as observers too. And if there are other guests that are on, we have no guests here in Connecticut. We're all one big family trying to figure it out and help each other out. So without further ado, I'm happy to pass this over to my partner in government, Deputy Commissioner Jody Hill-Lilly, to kick us off today. I'm ready to get to work and to stay active.
Wow, thank you, Commissioner. So thorough, so bright. She will not admit this, but the governor asked to have a meeting at this time, and she said, "Oh no! I have my racial justice summit." So they had to switch things around, which goes to show how supportive she is of all of you all. Who says no to the governor? So we have an exceptional leader in our commissioner and the entire exec team, and to this tremendous tri-chair who have worked tirelessly to get us where we are. I have the privilege of really talking to you all about Safe and Sound and how it all ties in. I was so incredibly moved and thankful and grateful to Monica for setting the tone with that music and that video of Kendi, whom we've rooted a lot of our principles in his work. And one thing that struck me that he said is that we need to be vulnerable. In order to be anti-racist, we need to be vulnerable. And so that is a direct connection to what we're trying to do with our Safe and Sound culture. Safe and Sound is rooted in safety science. And what we know about safety science, particularly in high reliability agent industries like ours, and when I say high reliability industries, I mean on the other side of our work is life or death, just like in aviation, just like in healthcare. And when you're working in these kinds of industries, you want to create a culture of learning. You want to create a culture of candidness. You want to create a culture of vulnerability.
where you are not afraid to admit when things are not quite right or when an error is made. Because the research is very clear that when you are in such environments, that the error rates actually go down. And that's what we want to see out of our safe and sound culture. We are part of a national movement funded and supported by Casey Family Programs. We, along with many other jurisdictions, I think we're up to like close to 30 now, jurisdictions that are in this plight to create this environment where we can learn from our mistakes, we can learn from each other. And that's not at the risk of, you know, compromising standards of practice. It's actually in the spirit of establishing standards in practice and accountability and responsibility. There's nothing like, and we wanted to make sure that our HR principles were rooted in that as well. We want to create an environment where we put everything on the table so that we can make sure that we bring our whole selves to this work so that we can protect kids and families. What better way to set the tone for our racial justice work? And so we deliberately and strategically, and I think many other jurisdictions sort of followed us, in that we have rooted our work, our racial justice work, in our safe and sound culture. We need to create this environment of honesty and candor and respect and learning. So as we are all learning, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is, who you are, what your background is, we all are part of this journey. We're doing this together, and I'm so incredibly excited for you all. We have work to do. We have systems to change. Every single person needs to be a part of this equation. And that's what the spirit of this presentation is all about. It's what each of our leaders are doing to contribute. The leaders who are in this work, the tri-chairs, the commissioner, the exec team, we're just a small part. You're doing the work. You're doing the work. And I am so excited to hear from you all what you are doing every day. I was watching the news last night, and they were talking about the atmosphere that is here. It's in order to change this narrative on racial justice. And the commentator said, if you have breath in your body, if you could see fog in the mirror, if you got any kind of life in you, you could see what changes need to be made right about now. And I applaud you all because you all are setting the tone and you are gonna be the change, not just talk about the change, but be the change. So I'm gonna stop talking and let you all get to where, show off where we are in Connecticut. So looking forward to this, and I'd like to call up, I think Monica's next. I want to bring forth the brains behind a whole lot of this, of what's happening. Boy, I could not have made a better choice in anointing this particular person. So I'll bring to you all Monica Rams, our Director of Multicultural Affairs.
Good morning, everyone. So glad to be here with all of you this morning. I'm excited to hear all of the great work that is being done across the state. I had the honor and privilege of hearing a little bit in the last couple of months as we did our cluster calls, and you all allowing me front row seat to hearing all the great work that's being done. And so all of you today will have the same honor and privilege of hearing everybody and having that front row seat. I will turn this over quickly to Tina and to Jen so that they can quickly do their brief introductions, and then I will go over with all of you what you can expect for today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you guys this morning. I cannot wait to hear from all of you wonderful leaders across the state and hear the work that you are doing. We are not perfect, but every day we are striving toward perfection and making sure that we are an anti-racist organization. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you. Jen?
Thanks, Tina. Good morning. I have to say that I always say we when I talk about Connecticut DCF, that I do feel like I live there, live with you in this space. And I just wanted to express appreciation for this whole notion of change initiatives. And there are just a couple things I quickly want to lift up. One, I was with Monica and Tina and also got that front row seat and hearing so many details and so much richness about the change initiatives. And this week I was introduced to this little phrase by a colleague of mine in San Francisco, Dr. Zaya Malawa, where she said, in racial justice work, we have to make a distinction between motion and action. And I was thinking a lot as she said that about these change initiatives, that it's really helping us translate doing things just to do things, doing activities, and instead, or before, and now with the change initiatives, we're actually doing things in order to affect change, in order to achieve results. And so it's really exciting for me to see the transition. It's also, I want to normalize how hard it is, that even when we're doing this, and I know Monica's going to talk about this, the sort of speed dating today version of, the 3-minute talk as fast as you can highlights, we know that there's so much underneath all of it. And we also know how hard the work is. And so we want to move from walking the walk to talking the talk. I keep joking with Jody and Tina and Monica that I don't want to walk, I want to run. I want to sprint the whole marathon. But I also recognize that we're always going to be balancing this urgency with the need to be patient and thoughtful and purposeful. The last thing I want to lift up, and then I'll turn it back to Monica, is something that I remember the commissioner talking about in our leadership summit probably 6 months ago, maybe more. And the commissioner talked not only about spheres of racialization, but she also talked about spheres of influence. And the thing that I think is so masterful about the change initiatives you've been doing is it really allows you to tap into your sphere of influence, your sphere of control, and make real changes that affect our real children and families and communities, not waiting for policy changes and for a year rollout process, but today and tomorrow, so that the kids and families and communities today don't have to keep waiting. So with that, I'm excited to hear these 3-minute, again, short versions, highlights. Think of this as a moment to be inspired and to inspire others. And again, this is a brief conversation today, not nearly enough time to do any of your work justice, but enough time for all of us to recognize how much work is happening across the state, and for us to go forward then at the racial justice lead level to think about how do we keep pulling it together to make this the work of the state. Monica?
Thank you, Jen. So today, all of you are in for a treat, as we said. As Jen briefly stated this morning, we talked about really highlighting the 3 minutes that you all have. There is a lot to discuss. There's a lot to review. So we talked about, just remind folks about your speed dating, right? So it's going to be really quick about what it is that you're going, the quick highlights of what is happening within your divisions. And so, because we really want to make sure that the folks at the end have the same opportunity to discuss and share what they're doing within their divisions. So we saw an opening video with Dr. Kendi. We heard the welcoming and opening remarks from our commissioner and deputy commissioner. We will go through each of the change initiatives that were aligned through the 7 key results. And so a lot of you participated in the cluster calls. And so it was just very much mirrored to all of that and where the folks were aligned. You should all have the order that I sent over to the presenters yesterday as to where you should be and where you fall in the agenda. So just be mindful of that. And then we'll continue to move forward. We'll have a closing video, and then we'll have closing remarks again offered by our commissioner and deputy commissioner. And so sit back, enjoy the ride. You guys are really in for a great treat.
And to get us started.
Yes.
I'd like to know, where's your energy this morning? On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being barely here and 10 being I'm on the edge of my seat. Where are you? We have a little over half who voted so far. Going to give you just a couple of more seconds. Okay. So we can see that the majority of folks are up at let's see, right at 7. So we got some pretty high energy, and yoo-hoo for those folks who are at 10. And we turn it back over.
I wanted to say 2 words and then turn it right back to Tina. And that is, I think when we introduced this concept of change initiatives, there was a lot of head scratching initially. Sort of, what does that mean? What are we expected to do? Someone tell us what we're supposed to be working on. And you jumped right into action, right? We didn't give you a lot of guidance out of the gate. We gave you some, a little bit of guidance, but a lot of latitude to say what matters to you from the seat in which you sit. What are the changes that you most want to impact? When you look at the key results, when you look at the pathways data, where do you want to make the move? And you jumped right in and you created change initiatives that were meaningful and purposeful and tailored and focused, and you got to work. And so we don't expect you to be done by March 31st. And today isn't even a checkup to say, compliance, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? It's an opportunity to say, we've now been doing this. We've had our heads down. We've been working really hard. Let's lift our heads up and check across the state. How are we doing? And so, Tina, you're taking us into the first one. We've organized these much like the cluster calls that, Michael gave us, I think, the charge at the very beginning of this, that we want to be able to tell stories. And we want to be looking key result by key result. Are we moving the needle? And so that's how we've organized today's session. And so many of you cross over, but we're going to start with key result. And Tina, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jen. Absolutely. Key result 1, children are able to live safely with their families. So this is preservation. This is keeping children at home. We know that it starts in our communities. We know that it starts with our external partners, but when they hit our front door, that's when our work really, truly begins. And I am really honored and privileged to hear from our front door. First up is the Careline, because, again, this is about every division. This is about every office. This is about every part of our agency. Doing this work and doing this work together. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Daymonde.
Good morning, everybody, and happy Wednesday. Middle of the week, we have a short week, so looking forward to the weekend. I hope everybody else is as well. Really excited about the work that we're doing at the Careline. We have 2 initiatives, right? We have a mandated reporter script, and we have demographic data capture from our EPIU, SIU, and our primary staff. Careline isn't only about the call center. There are a number of other divisions that I am responsible for, or we're responsible for. The mandated reporter script, we implemented it on February 2nd. The script really reinforces DCF's mission to be anti-racist in an agency of change. Staff are getting accustomed to it. They are reading it to mandated reporters. And what we're starting to see is that an increase in mandated reporters disclosing their race to us now. We have had some challenges. The script is a bit long. Staff are sometimes confused about how to respond to mandated reporters when they ask further questions. So we are guiding our staff in how to respond to mandated reporters and to encourage them to disclose their race to us. We are also looking at implementing it on our online reporting portal. There are some issues with it, so we haven't done it yet, but that's future thinking. We're also looking to put our script onto mandated reporter letters to really reinforce our work to become anti-racist. So you can see at the bottom on the chart, we've seen an increase from January to February where there's been a higher amount of disclosure from mandated reporters regarding their race. In our second initiative, we are capturing data, right? We're looking at race of reporter, alleged perpetrator, alleged victim, and starting to identify any perceived racial justice issues. This is being done within our work with EPIU, which is the Educational Professional Unit, SIU Special Investigations, and our primary staff who respond after hours. what we're trying to look at is the data and have it and compare it to statewide demographics, and really looking at different referral types. In the future, we want to look and compare what SDM is showing us and our results as of our interventions with families and how it relates to race. The one thing I want to say in closing, I think I'm about 3 minutes. I'm trying to race and talk really fast, so I apologize. What I really want to emphasize is that our work over the last 9 months across all my operation is our work around our racial justice team. We're meeting regularly and consistently, talking about issues. We have done our racial justice presentations, and we're just about done with our implicit bias. Not only are we starting to recognize implicit bias within ourselves, but we are also starting to recognize biases from our mandated reporters. What that's doing is really pushing us to think about the information that's being provided to us at the call, and helping and guiding us to decide if it should be accepted or not, and then how we can really talk to mandated reporters about their perceptions and their in their reports to us. We've had a number of cases that we've highlighted, so that's been really positive. Thank you, and I'll turn this over to David.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. Let's put it that way. Make sure my camera's on. Good morning, everyone. We don't have a particular name for our initiative, but the little quote there, small changes have big results. I really appreciated the technical assistance meeting we had for outcome number one, because we didn't have a large sample of kids that we were going to be focusing on, but Jen and Monica were fine, and Tina were fine with that, saying that just focusing on a small group to start would be great. And like Lisa said, we have a very active racial justice team in our office with Winston Taylor, Dina Kelly, McKen before them. 25, 30 people come to the meeting, and like the commissioner said, really staying active in the work. And this is really what we've seen from our racial justice group, is that the outcome, actually the initiative came from one of our line staff and looking at the data. And I think this is something that we've all been noticing, is that we're really focused on the data, and staff are getting used to looking at the data and trying to change the data. So what we noticed was that we had a disproportionate amount of Black children 6 to 12 coming into care. And then once they were in care, they were staying in care longer. So we wanted to see what we could do in order to really focus on that age group and these Black children. And what we did was we we have transfer conferences, but at the transfer conference, we inserted a meeting with the program supervisor, and they do a racial justice equity tool to really focus on these cases. And it's a coordinated effort between CPS staff and the RJ leads. And we've had a few transfer conferences so far, and what we've learned from this group is that we're really not doing well looking upstream at relatives and who we can identify as resources for these families. And so far, we're really having a good result from this, and we're moving forward. So that's about it from us, and I really appreciate all the work that we're doing and really keeping this alive in our office and keeping the conversation active. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I first want to just really sort of publicly thank the New Haven office Racial Justice Champions, and also our program supervisor group. Our champions have really pushed the office, myself, our program supervisors, to a very different place, in really being much more open and considerate and inclusive in our discussions. We meet pretty regularly, but our discussions have really changed. They've really expanded sort of our knowledge, and also allowing us to think about our internal biases, external biases, how we sort of view each other within our office, how that sort of translates to our work with our families. So I really want to just thank that group, because again, they have really pushed us and supported the Change Initiative. So the New Haven Change Initiative is called New Haven Ready. And it's also sort of known for associated with key result number 1. I'm trying to talk fast, so I'm probably gonna go over my time. I'm trying not to do that. So New Haven Ready, reducing entry to address disparity and preventing youth coming into care. So like I said, we've learned quite a bit of lessons. The slide does show some of our strategies. We have many more additional strategies that we've tried to implement on different levels. We wanted to take this approach not only just to a specific group, but to our entire office, because we realize that everyone has a role in preventing the removal of children. So, excuse me, again, like I said, our conversations have been much more inclusive. We have talked about things like sexual orientation, gender, just many more things as it ties into race, and again, ultimately preventing children. We've also talked about how we would like to differently approach our community providers, our conversations being different with them, their role in helping us to prevent removal of children. So one of our strategies is to really think about more of our different sort of intentional conversations with them, being much more intentional and really sort of asking them in a different way to share the risk around preventing removal of children. We, like many other area offices, we took a look at the racial justice equity tool. We intentionally changed that from the word tool to assessment. We did not want this to be sort of a checkbox for staff. We really wanted this to become something that is much more embedded in discussions. We're starting out with the discussions about removal, but we hope that moving forward, this will be embedded in various other aspects of our work. We did sort of a soft launch of this, utilizing this assessment with the program supervisors and having them sort of peak the conversation a little bit differently when people are coming to them to talk about removal. And what we found is that by everyone being part of these conversations, we have now sort of allowed staff to actually come back and say to a program supervisor or to a supervisor, if the race of this family was different, would we be making different decisions, or asking that question in some variations? And so from my perspective, that is truly progress. If we want to look at more of a quantitative, we looked at a small sample of our removals from January to March of 2020 up to January through March of 2021. While our numbers of children were the same, we definitely noted that digging deeper around the data, that it was definitely less families because there were 4 sibling groups. So we do feel that we have made some progress in our consideration in preventing children from being removed.
Thank you, Sheree. Good morning, DCF. I'm Melanie Mercado. I am the office director for the Willimantic office. And our change initiative is the inclusion of fathers of color in case planning. The way that we wanted to get there was in increasing the attendance of fathers of color in our consider removal meetings, referring fathers of color to the fatherhood engagement services when safety planning, and inviting and encouraging fathers of color to participate in administrative case reviews. We had many lessons that we learned through this process, and we recognized the importance of being purposeful and intentional with our actions in order to move in the right direction. We needed to strengthen our strategic plan in the areas of data collection and action steps if we really wanted to get fathers at the table and really be in action of having them included in our planning. The roles that the staff play in helping this initiative succeed needed to be clearly identified for our office. So we recognize that FALT, racial justice, and DAT teams, which are essentially our internal community meetings, needed help in ensuring that they were giving us strategies and ensuring that the work was being done from the ground up. In regards to the lessons that we've learned, data was a huge one, and ensuring that Link had the actual accurate information in regards to the race that the father identified with, not what the mother told us or what we assumed of that father. Ensuring that we have the right data to know whether or not we're moving the needle. So we've learned that ACR data by race is difficult to obtain. Therefore, we're going to have to do a monthly count of this and mix a couple of reports. We're very grateful that we're taking a big team approach in Willimantic, where our HCR team is helping us gather that information as we move forward. It was essential that we reactivated our FELT team in Willimantic in order to have ongoing collaboration with FES providers. It was crucial in regards to strategies and prioritizing who went to FES, ensuring that we were prioritizing safety factors as well as fathers of color. And then we needed to reestablish the roles and the structure of our racial justice teams and DAT teams, where we really utilized data to drive the work that we wanted to do. Most importantly, I think the lesson for us here in Willimantic is our intention and being strategic in regards to our actions and being fluid in the process as new information we learn, being able to shift our strategies where it makes sense. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and we hope to come back to tell you how we have moved the needle in Willimantic.
Thank you so much, Melanie, and all the wonderful leaders we've heard from already. I don't know about you, but I'm really, really energized just by hearing the report outs for the change initiatives for key result 1. So let's move into key result 2. And as I shared on the first summit, everyone was really energized about talking about ensuring that our children live with people they know, that they live with their family whenever possible. Of course, we're always striving to make sure that children don't go deeper into our system, but unfortunately, when they do, when it's important to their safety that they be removed, it's imperative that we start off with kin and with people that our children know. So we have several leaders that you're about to hear from that are going to talk to you about their change initiatives related to ensuring that our children, especially our children of color, are getting to live with kin and relatives in an equitable way. Let's start with Milford. Go ahead, Shawn.
Great. Good morning, everybody. And just to kind of make light of a little thing that happened, I remember when this first came about and Monica has sent emails out about the cluster calls, and I had responded back with a different key result. And she quickly responded back an email and said, Shawn, you are in key result number 2. So thank you, Monica, for framing that one out. And I could not be happier where we've landed on this. And I'm going to try to match the energy and leading off for key result or key performance indicator number 2. But for Milford, our change initiative is a look at relative kin placement with a disparity lens in the Milford area office. Now, the vision for this change initiative was to proactively identify relative and kin resources as potential caretakers for Black and Hispanic children coming into care. And this would directly relate to key performance indicator number 2, which is children who cannot stay in their home 70% will be placed in a kinship and relative care home. If you look at the graph on the data below, what you can see, and I'm not going to get into this, it would take too much time, is but we have actually seen a trend upward in some of the data that we're taking a look at in here, where you can see one of the areas where Milford really needs to focus on was the Hispanic kids that are coming into care. There's been a slight move of the needle, but clearly that's where a lot of our focus is. When we first started the initiative, we had some data that led us to look really at Black children and Hispanic children coming into care. And the more we peel this back and get involved in it, we're really finding that we have our work cut out for us, specifically with our Hispanic kids that are coming into care. Now in Milford, what we've done is we've developed several different strategies. What you can see below on the slide is 4 that we're really focusing on. The first one is that FASU has actually provided the Milford staff training, but we focused on small work groups. We've talked about this before in staff meetings, larger work group meetings. We really had the focus at this point on units, and that facilitated a much healthier dialogue. And I believe that that is really going to help when it comes to waivers and discussions about barriers. And one of the catchphrases that was actually kind of really came into play was that when a waiver is requested, we're actually asking, how can a relative be ruled in instead of ruled out? And we said that time and again, and it's definitely resonating with our staff. So some of the work is really paying dividends when we're talking about doing this type of work with FASU and these discussions with our small work groups. The second piece is the RRG is consulted and provides feedback when a relative or kin has been identified, and we're looking to assess previous current clinical issues. We've had a couple of cases so far where that's been a factor, and we're taking a look because we have had a few cases that have come up in the last few months where clinical issues with a potential resource have impacted our ability to move forward on those placements. And it was directly related to the population of Black and Hispanic children that we're really trying to focus on. The third piece is what we call an RJDM, and that stands for Racial Justice Discussion Meeting. That is actually something that I had developed in conjunction with the management team, which is whenever there is a removal, within 2 business days of the removal, myself as the OD will meet with the PS and the social work supervisor, and we discuss the reasons behind the removal. We talk about the CRM being held, whether it was pre or post, and we also talk about barriers and strengths to the placement. One of the things that I'm noticing in this, and we're getting close now to a dozen of these RJDMs, they have really proven to be beneficial in our assessment of some of what we're seeing. And one piece that we hadn't predicted that we're seeing more emphasis on paternal relatives. For example, we had a dad who was incarcerated, and through reaching out to him, we've been able to establish more contact with paternal relatives, which are becoming resources. It's also connected to our fatherhood engagement work. The last piece is that we have a QI to provide a monthly data report on initial entries by race, placement type, and unit to determine any patterns and themes. And the last thing I'll say is just Christian Stewart, who has done an amazing job with the Racial Justice Work Group in Milford, soon to be office director, has big shoes to fill and has really left a great impact and really laid a great foundation. Thank you, and I'm sorry I went over.
Good morning, everyone. So in our Hartford office, first I want to start off by saying that we are very committed, but not only committed, we are in full action. And so our change initiative in Hartford, as you will see, is relative kin placement matters. And our goal really is to make sure that when a child comes into care, they are placed with relative or fictive kin. Ideally, our overarching goal is that children remain with family if at all possible. And so what you will see is that so far, since we started our initiative, we have teamed 13 children and 5 children were African-American and 7 were Latinos. And so while it's a small sample, what's great is that we can demonstrate that every other child that has come into care has gone with relatives. And so some of our lessons learned have been meetings were too long. And so we've been getting feedback from our staff to make sure that we stay within the 30 minutes that are allotted per child. Many of the children require a higher level of care. And so we've been working with our regional resource group to make sure that when we come to the table, they are able to help us sort out what other options there may be so that we can stabilize our children and ultimately get them placed with relatives. Having a regional multidisciplinary structure has helped beneficial, and this is really feedback that we've obtained from our staff. There was a lack of documentation and progress of the placement with relatives and links. So this process really ensures that the managers are involved and that they are responsible for entering the notes and link to demonstrate that we are holding our staff accountable to make sure that they're exhausting every possibility to make sure that children are placed with relatives. And so we also learned that we need to revisit some of our data and making sure that we're capturing all of our children to ensure that they're being teamed. And so very quickly, if you look at the bottom, so far, the percent of the children of color in care and placed with Kim Hispanics, we have out of 182, we have 90 Hispanic children placed with relatives at 52%. And our Black African-American children are 86 out of 165 at 49%. On the right side, you will see the percentage of children of color entering care between July 20 to February 21st that were placed with fictive kin. And so again, we're very excited, very committed about this work. Listening early on, we continue to be motivated and energized. And this is an opportunity for us to really take a look at, are we making the right decisions? Are we exhausting every possible relative so that our children can remain with family? And we know that they're more stable, they're more likely to succeed. And so that's our change initiative in Hartford.
Good morning, everyone. And I just want to say it's really exciting to be here this morning. Kate Dwyer, for Assistant Legal Director. We've heard so many great ideas so far, and we really just kicked off the meeting. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing over in the legal division. We've been focusing since the initiation of our racial justice work on the central registry. And initially our focus was really on the pre-2007 registry placements. Prior to 2007, when an individual was substantiated, the placement on the registry was automatic. So we really wanted to kind of dig into those placements, and because of concerns about inequity on the registry as a whole, we wanted to look at those placements and see if we could figure out a way to provide relief to those individuals who had been placed in whom, through our current lens, might not have been placed on the registry. So we've took a multifaceted approach, and where we really landed was in the development of a new policy, which is a process for expedited review of barriers for placement in childcare. So the purpose of this new policy is to support the expedited review of child protection and criminal histories as barriers to placements under childcare. So when an individual, we're seeking to license them, we want to place a child with them, we're seeking to involve them in a family arrangement, or there's some other limitation to the child being a caregiver, or the individual being a caregiver to a child, and that barrier is related to placement on the central registry. We want to create a process for expedited review of those placements in order to be able to help those individuals, if possible, either be removed from the registry or at least give them that review, and then provide them with the information should they then need to move forward with seeking a hearing. So we've gotten the policy drafted, and it's in great shape. Our next step is going to be to work with the Academy for Workforce Development on rolling out training on this new policy, because we're going to want to ensure consistency in agency practice. We already have an emergency placements mailbox that has been used, but this policy is going to kind of formalize the process for submitting requests for reviews in that mailbox. And then again, we'll also set up kind of a parallel structure for barrier reviews that can be submitted both by DCF employees and also by individuals who have been informed by DCF that there is a barrier to their ability to provide childcare. So one of the lessons that we have learned in this process, as I mentioned initially at the top, is that we started out by focusing on those pre-2007 registry placements. And I think kind of one of the ideas we had thought about was to just look at those placements and see if we could take a deep dive into them and provide a review of those placements and do it in kind of a proactive way. But given the limitations on resources, we've discovered that this path forward with this process that we have, where we will review cases as they're brought to us on an expedited basis, seems to be something that is manageable with the resources we have, and yet will still also be able to provide relief to individuals, and will help us, again, on key result 2, which is enabling as many children as possible to live with kin and family. So I think I am within my time, but I just want to thank everyone for their involvement today. And this is really exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing to some of the other initiatives as well. So thank you.
Ellie, you're up. Kelly McVeigh, are you with us?
She's muted.
Okay, maybe we should move to Manchester and come back to, and we'll try Kelly again.
It's actually Meriden, Tina.
Oh, Meriden. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Maribel Martinez. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the office director in Meriden, and our region, actually, Region 6, developed Kin for Kids to focus on children being placed with relatives. And so I wanted to kind of share quickly our findings. We did a lot of work around study. So we identified a cohort of children early on to influence and have our program supervisors go back and review. And so in our findings, particularly for Meriden, there were no African-American children in cohort 1 and 2. We were able to lower disproportionality from 61.1% to 56.3%, with 2 Hispanic children moving with kin during this time period. What we noticed is that the PS consult is key to creating a loop back, because what we noticed is that people were not looping back to looking at relatives that had not been explored. And so you can see the difference in the before and after data with our region. One of the things that I wanted to kind of share with you is one of the children that were moved is 1-year-old Alexandra, and she entered care in May of 2020. And during that time, the team worked really hard at identifying relatives with the parents, both mom and dad. And we had 6 relatives identified, both maternal and paternal sides, a couple in state, but some out of state. And there was a lot of exploration on connecting with the relatives out of state as well. One of the impacts of COVID was the delays in ICPC reviews. And so some of that became an issue in this particular case with Alexandra. After a lot of work and connection with family through visits, she was able to be placed with an aunt out in the Waterbury region, and the Waterbury team was able to help us with that to get her placed with her relatives. So, you know, we did a lot of work around looking at the nuances of each of the children to give us a better sense of where we needed to focus. One of the things, or some of the things that we're doing as next steps, is really embedding this work in the FELT goals for 2021, looking at our pre-CR assessment questions to involve more father and paternal relatives, strengthening the kinship firewall, and utilizing our permanency resource specialist, Jane, who's been, I'm sure, inundated with a lot of requests lately. One of the other areas is partnering with our RRG to support kids with high-end needs, who I think present a particular challenge with relatives who are not prepared to handle their high needs. So I think it's been really important for us to partner with everybody within the region. So we do have FASU, RRG, CPS, and consider removal folks in our work group. And I think my time is up.
Nice job, Maribel. Are we going to go back to Danbury?
Tina, good morning. It's Jeanette. Kelly's having technical challenges. So if you could pass her for now, and then we'll try to go back to her maybe.
Okay, why don't we try for her at the very end after New Britain?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Donna Maitland Ward, the office director for the Manchester office. I'm excited to be here this morning. It was great to hear the video first thing. Our Manchester initiative really is connected to, as we shared, it's a regional one. Manchester had 4 kids of our, we actually had a total of 5 kids, I'm sorry, that met the criteria for our teaming, our regional teaming. And out of the 5, 4 were teamed. 1 we realized was missed. And if you see in lessons learned, it's one of the areas that we have to look at better, our data, pulling the right cohort, make sure we have the right kids. Most importantly, what I want to share about our lessons learned connected to this is you can see we had 3 kids that were in congregate care as a result of coming into care and needing that level of placement, and 1 medically complex. While we teamed those kids and we weren't able to secure relative placements for them, we were able to secure relative resources, family members that were able to visit those kids, and hoping that as we continue those relationships and those kids are no longer needing that higher level of care, that they'll then be able to move to the family resources. The other thing that we learned when we looked at this was, and most importantly, is we've been having a lot of discussions in our management team around the change initiative and how it's working. And I think really the anti-racist framework, the racial justice change initiatives have helped given us a platform to be able to have a foundation to have these discussions more ongoing. I feel like they're permeating through sections of the office, but we decided as a management team that we would have a leadership team meeting because we really feel like our supervisors are at the heart of the work that needs to get done. And we continue to hear from a lot of folks, but we have some quiet people and we really need to push the needle in order to get the work moving. So we're going to schedule a special forum with our leadership team to talk about our change initiative and allow everyone, sort of enforce everyone to talk about what changes they're doing in their work connected to the change initiative. Just to continue along with the data you see here, you see we have work to do connected to our African-American children. We've got 16 out of the 46 kids in care that at 35% that are in kinship placements. So we've got some work to do. We're having lots of discussions around it, and we're going to continue to have those discussions going forward. Thank you for allowing us to share where we are with our change initiative today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Siobhan Trotman, Office Director for the Torrington office. Very excited to be a part of this today. I'm excited to talk to you about our change initiative. In the Torrington office, since 2016, we have implemented racial justice consultations in the office. This is a model that was introduced to us by Dr. Anthony DeJesus. And we took that model, adjusted it to our office, and have been working with it over the past 5 years. We decided to utilize this model that we've been using as a tool to impact our relative and kin placement for children of color in care. So when we looked at our pathway data, we were happy to see that for children in care and entries into care, we did not have a disproportionality issue with regards to African-American and Hispanic children. Where we did see disproportionality was with regards to our multi-race or other race children. So you'll see in our data, although they represent 6.2% outside of the child welfare system, there are 19% entries into care and 16% children in care. So we focused on an age group of 0 to 11 kids in care. That represented 15 kids in our office. And when we looked at those kids a little closer, we found that 10 of those 15 were already in permanent placement. So that left us with 5 kids that were not placed with relatives that we decided to utilize our racial justice consultation to see if we could move the needle. For data highlights and lessons learned, we learned that we felt that racial justice consults could be an effective tool to improve outcomes. 2 out of the 5 children that we reviewed, or 40%, were placed with kin as a result of these consults. We pursued waivers for a grandmother for these 2 children and worked with our FASU division to place them. 2 out of 5 kids, or 40%, we did additional work to engage paternal family and or transracial, transcultural work with family members. And 1 out of 5, or 20%, the consults led to additional QPI work, or work to engage a reunification case to engage the foster families with the biological families. So the next steps that we see are to continue these racial justice consultations as an effective tool for looking at our kids in care. And we've also decided to look at the front door, our kids entering care. One of our child stat strategies is to look at every child not placed in relative placement coming into care. And so we've woven some of our racial justice questions into that process. So we're looking forward to continuing to move the needle and use these consultations and racial justice and looking at things through a racial justice lens moving forward, and excited to continue all of this work with all of you. Thank you.
Natalia, Liriano.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. From the Foster Care Division. Well, I am excited about all the work that is happening, and many of our program supervisors, their leadership, Bev, Tony, Judy, Tamara, Erica, and Renee, have been working alongside their CPS partners to implement some of the initiatives that are happening within each area office. Regionally, we wanted to focus on children who enter care and that their first placement was into kin, which is always, and to establish a baseline to figure out of those kids that come into care, how many are going into kin and how many are going into core, and looking at that information from a racial justice lens, looking at the number of how many Black and brown children. So we did establish a baseline, and then the work has been ongoing to update the kinship care firewall to make it consistent across the state. The other measure the other activity that we've implemented is that we realigned our resources or reimagined the role of the permanency resource exchange specialist and aligned them so that they are now sitting within the foster care division under the leadership of the placement supervisor, and their focus is on family search and engagement, and that launched last month. So their goal is if a child is separated from their mom or dad and they do not go into a kin but go into a core home, the permanency resource exchange specialists are to look at those children and focus efforts on finding relatives. So hopefully that will prove to do well. In central office, under the leadership of Lori Francis Cheney, our focus was to look at college freshmen and specifically look at Black and brown college freshmen to make sure that they succeed their first year. So first steps, some of the items that we've done so far is to collect data, because we found out we weren't collecting data on that population, nor were we collecting the data by race. So needed to do that. Second item for us was to assess our practice and our process. So we've partnered with a national organization just to look at our whole, our post adoption, post guardianship services, as well as just some of the technical aspects of our work to see if we can streamline that process. We have established relationships with Sun Scholars and expanding kind of the adoption resource, the AAP, the Adoption Assistance Program through UConn, in order again to help us support the that particular population. So in terms of our next steps, we are in the process of implementing and installing some of these efforts. The Quality Parenting Initiative is a cornerstone to our work, and we believe will also help in moving us to becoming a racially just system. So thank you.
That was really, really, really great. You can't change what is not measured. You won't, at least you won't know how you're improving or what your baseline is. Thank you, Natalia, for that. I just wanted to take a quick minute to encourage you all, everyone. There are 180 people on this call. We are 180 strong. Please blow up the chat and encourage your leaders. They are doing phenomenal work. If you have questions for them, put them in the chat. If you just have if something just touched you or moved you, or you were excited about something, just say great in the chat. Just want to make sure that we have a very, very active chat going on, and so that we give the leaders feedback on what it is that you're doing. Thank you. This has been amazing so far. I think we're going.
Just to interrupt, I did not want to leave out Bev Green. So all of the leaders in foster care. Just wanted to make that.
Excellent. Thank you. I think we're moving to New Britain.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well this morning. In New Britain, we, like Meriden, had a Kin for Kids initiative happening. And we looked at all the kids that were removed from care, and at their considered removal meeting were recommended for kinship placement. When we went back and looked at those children that were not in kinship placement, we were able to move six kids from core homes into kinship placement. We moved 2 Hispanics, 1 multi-race, and 1 African-American child. And you can see we did that simply by a managerial consult that went back and looked at the identified kin. And as a result, which I think is really important to note, as a result, we were able to move the needle. We reduced disparity for Hispanic children by 1.8%, for African-American children by 0.4%. And then, we wound up increasing the number of white kids in kinship care as well. So I think that that's important to know. As Maribel said, it was a simple managerial consult that helped us out. The other thing that we noted, there were 7 children originally placed with kin, and 1 was Hispanic and 6 were Caucasian. They disrupted less than 5 months, and they disrupted as a result of the behavioral health concerns, and there were no services in place for either the children or the kin. Some of the lessons learned is that we have a really strong practice in New Britain at the time of removal, looking for kin and securing relatives. If children didn't go with kin, we identified some reasons in terms of kin not being engaged, difficulties between kin and parental relationships. The children were medically complex on the spectrum, or had behavioral health concerns. The other piece outside of PS consultation that is key to creating loop back is also the work that we're going to be doing regarding our fatherhood engagement and engaging paternal relatives. As we look forward, we will continue with program supervisor consults regarding kin, and also focus on father and paternal relatives when it comes to considered removal meetings, questions and assessments. We want assessments to be equally as complete around fathers and paternal relatives as we do for mothers and maternal relatives. Maribel mentioned the kinship firewall and the resource exchange specialist, and strategies we're implementing around those folks as well. Thank you for your time.
Waterbury, Maritza.
You're muted, Maritza.
I see you, but I can't hear you. Okay, talk now. Nope.
What I would suggest is doing what Kelly did, which is go out and come back in again. So maybe Kelly could present while Maritza's going out and coming in again.
Hi, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, Kelly.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
So
Hey,
I said,
Kelly.
of course, like talk about like it wouldn't let me unmute. I was like, I had no idea. It had me hit something in settings saying I was on some privacy. I don't know what that is, but anyway, I figured it out. So good morning, everyone, and I'm sorry for the delay. So Danbury focused on increasing the number of children in initial placements with relatives. We arrived at that initiative because when we looked at our initial placement for children with kin, we were at 36% for the office. And when we looked at our total population of kids in care, we're actually at 50%. So for us, we really wanted to try to examine what was kind of happening at that front door process that was leading to kids, eventually getting to an increased number with relatives. So we decided to implement the case consultation model specifically for cases that were experiencing CRMs between January and March. And so for any children that enter care that don't go to a relative, within 2 days, we do the racial justice case consultation model. We had 8 cases experience CRMs between that time frame, and 2 cases experienced removals, one of which we did do the racial justice consultation tool. So really the lessons learned are like several, and I know we only have a few minutes, but I do really think that the process of us examining this really caused us to have a really good outcome for a host of areas. We've reduced the number of kids in care. That's one outcome, which was not the intended outcome. And ultimately, we were able to really pay attention to what I would call like slowing down the process, which we know for all of us, anytime we can afford a family the opportunity when there's a crisis that's brought them to a situation where we think there's a safety factor and a potential removal. I think if we can afford individuals, the opportunity, families, the opportunity to really slow down as well as us, then I think we know that that allows for the process to really mitigate risk and safety to really happen. And I really can't underscore that enough. I think it's been, so an example of just one of the cases we did, like on a Friday, we did a safety plan. By doing a safety plan, allowing the child to still remain safe, allowing the family to pull together their resources and get back together. So the delay in doing the considered removal right away really brought the family together, their resources together, and mitigated, the removal in many of these cases, but also in the case where we did remove children, we were able to have a grandmother who lived in New York be able to come together, come down here, and really assist the family in being able to safeguard the children. So I really can't underscore that piece enough about the slowing down. And I think the other piece, I think just really making sure that for after hours that we really pay attention to sort of what I would call our collaboration with others. So some of the cases that we examined during this period of time, unfortunately we get the report in the morning and you work throughout the day to you know, really pull people together and their resources. It seemed like you were in a situation by the time you figured everything out with the family, you were in an emergent situation. So again, the collaboration with foster care, our collaboration with the CRM folks that I now supervise in my office, which is a great addition. And really, anytime there's opportunities to work with our Careline, I think if we can kind of hone in a little bit more on that, I think we'd even have better outcomes than we do. But I'm really proud of the team. I think people have done a phenomenal job at the intake level. I think one of the other directors said this is the amount of time that it takes to do it this way does require a change, but I think that staff really see that this is really how we need to be doing our work, is to really prevent kids from coming into care in the first place. And when they do, make sure it's with someone that they know. So thank you for your time, everybody.
Maritza, are you back? A good reminder for everyone as well that Zoom is different from Teams. And so it's important that you look at the bottom of your screen to unmute and not where your box is.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Because I have you on my phone. I think it's just something going on because you're unmuted on my end, on my screen, but it's not working. So I will do my best. I have you on the phone so you guys can hear me. Am I echoing though?
Yes, so just mute yourself on Zoom and use your phone so it doesn't echo.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Thank you. And I apologize for the technical difficulties. So from the Waterbury area office, the Brass City, our change initiative is implementation of racial justice case consultations. And so we recognize the importance of kids remaining home, if at all possible. But when they enter care, it's really important. One of the biggest things for the Waterbury area office is to really work on children remaining with families when at all possible. And so our children of color is who we targeted, children of color not placed in relative or kin care. And so we started with a group of, am I echoing, guys? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you're still echoing. Is your computer volume turned up still?
Yeah.
It should work if you turn the volume down because we're hearing you and your computer.
Bear with me 1 second. All right. It's down. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. There's still an
Sorry.
echo.
Yeah.
Maritza, if you take your phone and walk further away from your computer, that helps with the echo sometimes.
Okay, let me try that because my volume is all the way down.
And it's only a few minutes. More important to hear you even if we're hearing an echo too.
So a little better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So for Waterbury, we recognize the importance of children who enter care, when they enter care, being placed, with someone who they're most familiar with, whether relative or kin. So our change initiative is the implementation of the racial justice case consultations. And we've, looking at our pathway data, recognized that children of color were not placed with relative or kin care. That was an area in which we need to improve on. And so we started having the consultations and modeling more of a safe and sound culture. We're empowering our staff who are a part of this multidisciplinary team meeting to talk about, their thoughts, their process, and why we were not able to get kids with relatives. And so the racial justice leads rolled out the consults in which take place. We started initially with a cohort of 10 children, which dwindled by the time we got to the 90 days to 5. 3 were reunified, 2 were placed with relatives. And so when we did that, it was really going over a series of questions with the staff in which they are able to express their own implicit biases. And we thought it was really, really important when having these discussions. One of the things that was huge for us as a lesson was many of our staff had perceptions of things that we could not do a waiver on. And so I actually connected with Natalia, and we provided a learning forum for our supervisors. I would say at our leadership meeting, we provided a learning forum in which the staff were able to ask questions. Natalia was able to present things that are, the regs and what you can do to submit a waiver and the importance of timeliness of waivers. And she also did that jointly with a program supervisor from Waterbury as well as Hartford, because we recognize that Hartford, their initial placements, those kids that were entering care were going to kin or relative care at their initial placement. And so as part of that, we've really seen that the numbers, that things have gotten better. With enhancing our partnership with FASU, with having FASU at the table to be a part of the conversation. When relatives were not identified, FASU has followed up with a CPS staff to say, hey, LexisNexis, what else have we done to explore viable resources? And we've also strengthened our partnership with community providers. So in cases in which there were issues with reunification programs, we've connected with our systems program director to certainly follow up with the programs to see what we can do. And so for our data, we started this it was more 90 days. And as I mentioned, it was 10 children of color who entered care who were not placed with relative or kin. And so we went back 5, like I mentioned, 3 were reunified, 2 what relative caregivers, and the 5 that actually had the racial justice council were 1 was multi-race, 2 were African-American, and 2 were Hispanic. 1 out of the 5 was reunified with the father in Utah. And so we were able to locate and engage father and make arrangements and assist to pay for him to come here to bring his child back home. And then another child has severe height and needs, which is in congregate care. However, we've done a lot of work with the father who is actively involved and a part of the planning with his son. And then another 1 out of the 5 is an ICPC, which is pending, which is the sibling of the child who we reunified with in Utah. And then we have 2 sibling groups who are in a core setting. And what I will say about these particular 2 kids, it was unfortunately a repeat child maltreatment situation in which they entered back care. However, we were able to place them in the home in which they were previously placed in. And so we continue to have these racial justice consultations. We found it to be very beneficial, in which even our staff have been able to talk about their own implicit biases and what they've learned through the process. And so we're really hoping to move the needle, especially in Waterbury, and where kids, if they need to enter care, their initial placements will be with relative caregivers or kin.
Wow, Maritza, thank you so much. And thank you for hanging in through the technical difficulties. So we are at the end of the change initiatives for outcomes 1 and 2. I don't know what to say off the top of my head except wow. But let's check in on this. And whoops, we're at the wrong one. Stop that one. There we go. So I want to check in. How likely do you think it is that we at DCF will be able to achieve these outcomes within the next 2 years? We're up to almost half of you who have voted. Going to give you another 5 seconds. And end the polling. Wow, so we have a lot of folks who think that we're very likely, a good chunk that are definitely, and it's somewhat. So hopefully we'll have some time, we might have some time to discuss this at the end of the call, but if not, as you get back to your offices and your units and think about what would it take to have more people move up to definitely. So back to you, Tina.
Actually, we're going to turn it over to Monica.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Tina. So I get the privilege of introducing key result 4. Children will be in congregate settings rarely and briefly. So the last round of key result 2, it was very heavy on the area offices with the exception of foster care. And so I'm really excited because now we get to hear from our facilities. So we will hear from Elizabeth Fetter from Solnit North, representing Dr. Brett Rayford, and we will also hear from Amy Samela from Solnit South, in for Dr. Francis Gregory. Starting with Elizabeth.
So Monica, I was able to make it in. Hello, DCF. I'm sorry to give you that little curveball, but I was able to make it.
That's okay. I'm glad you're here.
Okay, so very good. So our racial justice initiative is about increasing the number of boys in treatment at Solnit North, of course, with the desire to create a positive outcome for those young men and their families. And I want to contextualize this a bit. For those of you who are familiar with the JJ system, juvenile justice historically in Connecticut has been 85 to 90% boys of color. And at the same time, boys in treatment, largely over the years, have been Caucasian boys. So that really has inspired our focus to increase the number of boys of color in treatment with the intent to create a tremendous outcome for them. So if you look at our calendar year of 2020, of 81, now let me emphasize that Solnit North is a small pond, and it's small enough that we can control a lot of the ripples across this pond. So we had 81 young men enter, 29 Caucasian, 25 Hispanic, 19 African American, and 8 biracial. Now these numbers really are consistent with the demographics of Connecticut when you look at the Medicaid population. So we're doing pretty well there. And it's been a concerted effort over several years to get to this point. But we did observe that often young men of color are being referred to us late. So they've interacted in the system down the road when they actually could have been referred to Solnit North to increase the likelihood that they would have great outcomes. So we've had a few strategies here. Strategy 1 has been to educate families of color about the array of services that a PRTF, our PRTF in particular has. And that's been done by word of mouth, by creating a brochure that creates, the clear image of boys of color in treatment here. We present our services to the urban school districts in an effort to intersect with those players so that they know that when they have a young man who's beginning to struggle, that they have the capacity to refer to Beacon and then to us. We've had, COVID's put a little bit of a damper on some of this, but we've had conversations, met with parole supervisors over the years to sort of detail out the kind of young man that would benefit from services here. And it's all about early assessment and referral. So strategy 2, strategy 3, you've heard. So the outcome measures is that we want to, over time, quarterly, look at the referral patterns and make sure that we're maintaining that racial balance in the pattern of referrals. We have to look at ourselves, of course, when we do this. So over the years, we've noted that we have a very multicultural campus. We have a very diverse group of staff. And so the work comes easy. One of the issues, of course, has been when we have a young man come into an environment like ours, it's very different than the place that he left, let's say Bridgeport, that we're teaching that young man new skills. But we also have to make sure that we don't strip him of the skills that allow him to survive in his town of Bridgeport. And so what does that mean in terms of behavioral styles? There's a lot of conversation with our young men about, how they code shift. So how do you behave in a school environment versus a community environment when you're hanging out with your boys? And some of that has to do with how well they do when they return. We have noted another uptick in the number of boys who are being referred over this 2020 year, despite COVID. So that's a good thing. And we expect that pattern to continue. Some of the lessons learned, we have to be really transparent about who we're recruiting and how. We have to pay attention as well to the composition of the campus. There was some time, some years ago, when we realized that there was a cottage that was comprised of all white young men. And so how did that happen? So we must pay attention to the composition of the campus and the composition of each cottage. And then finally, one of the lessons learned is that we have to be very competent in talking about racial identity development with our young men. It comes up in treatment. It comes up, of course, as they sort of live in America, as racialized as it is these days. So that treatment focus is really crucial as we move forward with our work. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Amy Samela, and I'm the Director of Clinical Operations at Solnit South, which is the girls' PRTF in the hospital. So I'm covering for Dr. Gregory while he's out. So jumping right in, our overall plan is to identify and address racial disparities and key indicators across 3 broad domains. 1, youth and family access to treatment, 2, youth and family experience in treatment, and 3, youth and family treatment outcomes. Examples of treatment access would be referrals and our admission rates. Examples of treatment experience would include things like participation in treatment team meetings, medication use patterns, and frequency of our emergency safety interventions. For us, that's restraint and seclusions. And third, examples of treatment outcomes would include things like the ability to transition to a home versus another setting, the length of time in care, and improvement in functioning and problem severity. Our current initiative focused on the youth and families' description of their experience, so their perception of decision-making in their treatment. Engaging youth and families in authentic partnership is certainly a core priority of us at Solnit and something we not only value, but we do pride ourselves in. For the first part of our initiative, we looked at a sample of 100 youth who were discharged from both the girls' PRTF and the hospital combined, and we used information provided from the Ohio scales. Many of you are probably familiar with this measure. I'm sure you've been asked to complete it in some point in time in your career. And what you see in front of you is some of that data that we analyzed. So we examined the Ohio scales, specifically the satisfaction ratings from 2 reports, one the youth self-report and then the parent report form. Just so you know, the parent report form is completed by the adult caregiver, which could be a parent, a grandparent, or even the foster parent, et cetera. The key items that we focused on were 3 questions. How much did they feel that they were included in their treatment planning process? 2, the extent to which the treatment team listens to them and values their ideas about their treatment. And 3, how much the treatment plan includes the ideas about their treatment needs. So while we looked at overall responses, our focus was comparing the responses given by white, Black, and Hispanic youth and their parent and their caregiver. We combined some of these scores, just for some background on the Ohios, we combined some of the scores so that there was a high and low rating, and the high represented the responses from quite a bit to a great deal, and then the low responses compiled the somewhat to not at all. And then as you can see on the graph, each bar represents the total percentage of that group, with the high is the orange and the low is the blue. You can't really see orange there, but that's the lighter blue. It's orange on my slide. Overall, the responses were high across most of this sample, but there were some differences, and that's what we're really focused and looking at. So one thing you can see first is that in general, the youth responses had a higher frequency of low ratings than did the parent responses. But in the parent group, the responses were rated high in most instances. So again, that's good. But while the low ratings of parent participation and inclusion were few in number, this is the most important thing for us to think about. In every instance where this was identified, it was identified by a parent of a youth of color. So parents of Black youth reported the most low responses to each question. So in the youth group, the responses were mostly rated high, although as I said, there were more low ratings from the youth overall than the parents. And although there were low responses from each youth group, the percentage of low ratings, again, were highest from the Black youth and from the white or Hispanic youth. So what does all this mean and what are we going to do about it? So we've taken a lot of this data. So the first part was just looking at this data, compiling this data. We got a good response from most of our families as far as submitting them, but we got, I think it was something like 80%. We need to now obviously get more of the responses. That's important. But then it's about having the conversations with all of the people. So our next part of our initiative has started where we take this data and we bring it to all of our treatment teams. So many of our families have access to all of our staff. So it's making sure that all of this conversation happens with all disciplines. And that just started. So hearing what they have to say and looking at developing strategies to address them. The other forums, though, that we're talking about this and processing the results of this data is within our diversity action and racial justice teams. And most importantly, honestly, it's our youth advisory group. We know a lot about kids, which is they're brutally honest. So we definitely know we'll hear some good stuff from them. So really, those are our next steps. So stay tuned and we'll continue to have this conversation. Thanks for your time.
So we are at a point where I think we can all use a break. There was a lot of information shared with us this morning. There is more to come. So we will give you a break until about 10:45. You will be hearing music. And then once you hear the music stop, that's your cue to come back and join us. So have fun.
You're broken down now.
A word or phrase about what has inspired you about what you've heard so far, and then we'll get started with our next initiatives. While you're putting your thoughts in the chat, I will turn it over to Jen.
Thanks, Susan, and welcome back, everybody. I hope everybody got a chance to stand up and stretch and refresh. This has been the fastest meeting I think I've ever attended, and I think it's just not just the pace, but the depth and the richness of what you're all sharing. I know we're all struck by different things, and it's so much fun to read what's happening in the chat right now. Keep this coming. You know, today is meant to be a bit of a re-energizer and a bit for those of us on the racial justice lead team and the statewide racial justice work group. I'm sure all of our collective heads are just spinning right now and thinking about how do we harness this and translate these needles that are moving for real children and youth and families today and make it just the way we do the work. So that in 2 years from now, to Susan's earlier question about, you know, how realistic will we achieve and move these needles in 2 years, that in 2 years we'll be having a totally different conversation because our needles will have moved. Now, as we move into key result 5, we are starting to think more about some of the systems, and we've still got a lot of offices that we're going to be hearing from, but I think you're going to start to hear again a little bit of a shift in the conversation as we start to really authentically blend the work that's happening in the field with children and youth and families to that community and service system and partnership collaboration type level. So I'm going to turn it over and we'll follow the same format we did. We're going to lead off with Bridgeport and Carla.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Carla Perella. I am the interim office director for the Bridgeport office. And the change initiative we are talking about is the implementation of the racial justice equity assessments and consultation. The Region 1 Racial Justice Leads developed an equity tool. This equity tool identifies and addresses potential barriers to permanency. It also addresses challenges and takes into account social equity influencers. The tool's embedded into the 90-day meetings that the team has, made up of a multidisciplinary team. The cohort is ages 0 to 2, African-American children in core foster home with a permanency plan of reunification. Bridgeport currently has 6 children identified, which is made up of 5 families, and there is 1 sibling group of 2. Early successes we've talked about is we've laid the foundation using the safe and sound culture. We've outlined the racial justice framework and have done the implicit bias training. And we've also brought this information to our RAC. We really feel like we have set the foundation for this change initiative. And what we're starting to see is a shift with our staff. We are seeing staff coming to the table, being transparent, addressing and talking about their own biases. With this cohort, we've had some tough conversations, and we've had conversations about, could we possibly be some of the barrier towards children's reunification? Is it that sometimes we're not comfortable with the plan of reunification because families are not what we consider to be perfect? Or have we not checked off all of our boxes in order to make those referrals to the reunification programs? So as we talk about service delivery, we've been having conversations about making referrals earlier on throughout the life of the case, not waiting, trusting in the provider's assessments, and really having to be comfortable with those recommendations about moving forward with reunification. So the data we have is preliminary, and we are seeing out of our 6 that we will have a projected reunification case in 90 days. Out of our consultations, we asked out of 4 out of the 6 children that we've talked about that our staff go back and further assess and explore additional relatives that came up in these meetings. We have 1 where we have an interstate compact pending, and we actually have 1 home study that is out of the country in Canada. So we're excited about that one. We're really excited about this change initiative. We are moving to an additional cohort. We are now going to be implementing this equity tool into what we're calling our 30-day meetings, and we are calling them CAP, and that stands for Children Achieving Permanency. So we look forward to reporting out in the future and more information to come. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Elizabeth Duryea here representing the Systems and Organizational Development Division, and I know we're equally excited to talk about the work that's underway within the Systems Division to highlight where we see our work aligning to support the transformation of our system, and appreciated Jen sort of framing that. So a couple of highlights, I think that building on the energy and what's happening within the area offices, and as a couple of the change initiatives touched on, how can the Systems Division help to engage the community, our partners, our providers? I think that our strategies are really focused on both internal engagement and external engagement. We know that there are a number of presentations underway, including the anti-racist framework and implicit bias trainings, as well as a number of others that are focused on engaging our regional advisory councils, our networks of care, our provider network, our community collaboratives. And to date, actually, an update from this slide is there have been over 400 since August. So we really want to think about how are we capturing that? How are we assessing how we build a structure to measure the impact of these trainings, of these presentations, in terms of change behavior, in terms of shifts in mindset, in terms of how we see this benefiting our practice across the system, not just within DCF. So really benefiting from some of the insights that we've gotten in partnering with the Academy for Workforce Development around how we can use some of the pre and post tools to capture some of that and give us a little bit of an understanding of not only how do people react to these presentations and trainings, but also how do we keep this on the forefront as we really seek to embed what is systems transformational work. The other piece that I would highlight, and I think that one piece of this starts with, providing information, providing our framework, having our partners participate in implicit bias trainings, but then how do we connect the dots to the actual work? And that's where the data is really critical. And so our second strategy is really specific to two of the service types that we see being intrinsically tied to permanency, intensive family preservation and reunification and therapeutic family time. We're really drilling down into our enhanced service coordination data and benefiting from continued partnership with Jenny Vesco, who's our program lead within the Child Welfare Bureau, to help understand what is our starting point, what is our baseline, what are the service trends that we see with those two service types where there may be potential disparities that we need to dig into at the area office level. And so as Maritza reflected on this relative to the work underway in Region 5, I know that that is happening in collaboration with the area offices, and I think something that we are really seeking to build toward to see what from this approach can we then take and lift up and look to expand to other service types. We know there will be an opportunity to further that expansion as we lift up the work of the Service Outcome Advisory Committee. And we know that that will also help to guide what is our data collection. And we know that data collection is one of the strategies with the CT Kind team. How can we improve our data collection relative to race and ethnicity and allow for that to more fully analyze trends in our services, both trends internally around how we make those decisions, around where we refer families, but also where do providers have a stake in those conversations. So really just very excited to see how we can connect dots with all of you. And again, really seeking to promote some shared accountability for this systems transformational work. Thank you.
Hello?
We hear you, Orlando. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Orlando Quadrado from ACR. And we are, our change initiative is Real Facts, stands for using a racial equity assessment lens for all children to succeed. We're looking to really embed racial justice, a racial justice lens, and a lot of the work we do. It's a standing item in our agendas for all staff meetings. We feel it's important for us to discuss and learn from each other in real time how race is playing out in the work that we do, which is quality assurance. This last staff meeting we had, we discussed the Crown Act and its possible impact on what we do, and have even invited the Crown Act sponsor, the state rep, Robin Porter, to our next meeting. Specifically, we collectively identify racial disparity. We're looking to develop some racial justice focused questions for ACR tools with an emphasis on permanency and how it's affected by race and ethnicity. That would allow us to aggregate and analyze the data by race, as well as report out how permanency plays out, by race and ethnicity. That analyzing the data will be important, and right now we don't have the mechanism to really aggregate it easily. We are, on a side note, in our 4th month of collecting and analyzing data on how COVID has impacted educational well-being of the children in our care. And, as the data right now is confirming that it disproportionately impacts children of color to varying degrees throughout the state. So it's that type of analysis that we hope to do even on a permanency side. We're looking to respond to racial disparity during the actual case review process in real time. So, in addition to developing racial justice focused questions for our tools, we're looking for ways to provide feedback to the area office. Right now, it's happening at the meeting with follow-up emails, but we'll be looking for a more formal mechanism where we're leaning towards using the CTM as the process to not only report out on particular permanency issues, but race as how it's affecting permanency issues. We're also, for quality improvement, they're assisting area offices with pathway data and its integration into practice. The QI, which is headed by Dakibu Mule, they sit on all the regional and area office racial justice committees in support of the data development. They've been assisting the area offices utilizing the equity toolkit, in particular providing guidance and the application of a racial justice lens to the areas of practice, whether it's legal consults, registry consideration, supervision as a critical decision-making point, and kinship placements. But last but not least, performance management, headed right now by Nicole Dionis. There's, analyzing the data and discussing it, but then there's the people that actually, are in charge of the provision of this race and ethnicity data for our racial justice initiatives. And it's been embedded in all the presentations that you've seen. And so that comes from this camp. They assist with the analysis of the racial disproportionality data and provide the race ethnicity data that we all have been using as part of our change initiatives.
Good morning. Can you see me?
We can, go ahead.
Oh, good morning. I'm Yolanda Chapman-Smith. I'm the office director for Norwich. Hope everyone's well. So the Norwich office journey began with the anti-racist framework as a focus on key outcome measure number 5, children achieving permanency within 12 months. We recognize in our area, this is something that we want to focus on. We're at 32%, the federal average measure is 40%. So we really want to focus on getting permanency for kids. So we took racial justice equity tool that was developed by one of our racial justice lead, Kim Watson, to take that tool and embed it in a 90-day review meeting that we already had established in the Norwalk office for a period of time. That tool allows us to sit at a table with different perspectives, from systems to clinical PD, from RRG, case aides, the social worker, FASU, CQ, CRM facilitator, to talk about how do we get this kid home from different perspectives and different lenses. So we really thought this would be the best way to move the needle, is to already embed this tool into something that we already have in existence. So we took out our cohort, it's Hispanic children age 0 to 5. We had 10 cases. We did those 10 cases and we identified 2 racial inequities already. One being with a family unable to reunify because they didn't have an equipment to do the service delivery. So that was great to able to address that issue with the clinical PD and the systems to really help get that family to meet the services that they need to reunify with their child. And the other one was that the worker identified her own bias regards to a 17-year-old mom and adolescent and being Hispanic. How is that money going to take care of the children? So that allowed us to really look at inequities. The lessons that we've learned over this time, and I will say our change initiative, we kind of changed the wording a little bit to be change responsibility, because it's our responsibility to make sure this work happens. And we've learned our responsibility is by having the anti-racist framework and implicit bias training with DCF and stakeholders. That was able to be rolled out. We strengthened our partnership with service providers. We showed our investment across intersecting systems, from the police department came to implicit bias training, to probation office, to GALs, education, to hear where the department is going and also to partner with us to move the work forward. We've learned that we have to look at our organizational culture in our office in Norwalk so staff can feel comfortable with challenging one another, with challenging management. So we felt that this, by having those trainings, has set up the platform for that safe and sound culture that we've been talking about. We had to look at our organizational culture so staff know where your staff are and where we are, so we can have staff bravely express their implicit biases about our inequities. In this equity tool assessment that we have questions that we will help us to assess service delivery for our families, because we know in our area in Norwalk, we have an undocumented population that struggles and how do we really address the inequities for them. And that's how the tool is to be utilized to help us as an agency and providers recognize how do we get the best service delivery for our families. We continue to partner with our community. We have been at the RAC meetings to really hone in on what we need to do. You know, as I said, as I leave, we can continue to strengthen our partnership with our staff and our stakeholders to really achieve the outcome of permanency within 12 months, because they make the difference. And I said, like I said earlier, it's about, we changed, it's not about the initiatives, it's about our responsibility, because we're the beginning and not the end. And this work must continue with all of us, and we empower the staff because they are embedded in this change initiative. My racial justice leads, Tawanda, Paul, Emma, and Kim really make a difference. Thank you so much.
Wow, wow, wow. I wish you all just knew how proud we are of you. Everybody's so afraid of the 2020, retirement cliff. And, judging from what's happening here, we are in good hands with our leaders. I don't know about you, but I know the exec team and the national leaders that are on the phone and our consultants. Excuse me when I say this, but our staff in Connecticut, our leaders in Connecticut are better than yours. Just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful work. And we know great work, Yolanda, you gave us some new language to incorporate. Thank you. We know that we cannot do this work alone. We cannot rest all of the responsibility on caseload carrying staff and that chain of command. So we have been laser focused on the infrastructure of this agency to ensure that every leader, no matter where you sit, is contributing to the problem. And that's the way we move this needle, through our lens of implementation science and all of the systems inside and outside of our agency. So now we're going to focus in on some of the infrastructures that are in place, and pay close attention to these leaders, how they are contributing to the narrative. First up, we have Melanie Sparks from Fiscal.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be able to talk to you today a little bit about what we're doing in our division. Our initiative was two-pronged, and it all related to engagement of our provider partners as we try to move our racial justice needle. I've jokingly said that for my division, we have 1.5 initiatives going on. Our half initiative was a partnership with the programs divisions to strengthen our expectation of every contracted provider when it comes to class compliance. The end goal of that initiative is to support our providers through the compliance process until each is fully class compliant. Our contribution to that goal in my division was the development of reinforcing language in all of our contracts. As of today, I can tell you that every one of our 100 contracts has been amended to include language that strongly encourages our providers to pursue class compliance and obligates us as a department to assist with that process as our providers navigate through it. I think the lesson that we've learned so far is that our provider network is wholly open to this and committed to this initiative, and they understand its importance, but financially and administratively, they're limited. And that ties back directly to my division's responsibility to work with our program staff on an ongoing basis to identify new ways to mitigate those challenges for our providers. Our whole initiative, our more tangible initiative for my division, it's related to the idea that our families engage and they respond more positively when being served by people who know and are like them, their daily life, their community, their culture, their language, their economic struggles. This translates to targeting the engagement of small grassroots, minority-run nonprofits to partner with us in serving our children and their families. But the struggle with that lies in a very prescriptive state procurement process that these small agencies don't always have the acumen or the resources to respond to with the agility that the larger, more corporate agencies with grant writers on staff and established finance departments do. Where those small providers excel in service provision to their communities because of their knowledge, their lived experience, their shared demographics, they struggle from the inadequate infrastructure of their own agencies that our larger, more established partners have actually grown. To mitigate this, we designed a procurement training that's aimed at targeting the weak areas that we routinely identify in proposals from our small agencies. This training breaks down the state procurement process to its base. It provides hands-on exercises with real-time feedback to give those entities confidence in their proposal submissions and to equalize the playing field of state procurement. To date, we've trained 225 people. We're gearing up to offer another series of this training in the fall. And the lesson that I've personally learned from this is seeing state procurement through the eyes of these providers and understanding just how intimidating and off-putting it can be from a small provider's perspective. That's my team's job to mitigate. We're responsible for breaking down those barriers and leveling the playing field. We also redefined our standard RFP to incorporate a standard section that's designed to elicit responses from our applicants that target specifically 3 areas: cultural relevance in the community to be served, cultural diversity of the organization applying, and cultural responsivity to the families in the service catchment area. This will be a component of every RFP that's issued by DCF. It's weighted as one of the top 3 highest scoring categories for every RFP. This section specifically targets the small grassroots minority-run businesses that we're looking to partner with as we move our racial justice initiatives forward. The forthcoming RFPs in the next few weeks will be the first ones that we use that include this language, and we intend to analyze responses and scoring once each RFP is finalized to determine if our request yields the responses that we're targeting, mainly the addition of providers who understand and know through their cultural and socio commonality the children and the families that they serve. Thanks so much.
Good morning. Health and Wellness Division Change Initiative is more for longitudinal change initiative. We identified a chronic medical condition that is very common in children and has significant social as well as clinical impact, asthma. And looking, so our work so far is to identify youth in care with an asthma diagnosis. We've identified 62 youth in care with asthma, with a persistent asthma diagnosis. 18% African-American, 13% biracial, 29% Caucasian, and 31% Hispanic. The next phase of our initiative is to dive deeper into the medical care of these youth who are identified with asthma to make sure that their medical needs are met and that appropriate community and preventive service has been, that these children are engaged in appropriate community services as well as education identified by a current asthma action plan or and or engaging in the DSS intensive case management and putting on air as community service for asthma support. So we're looking forward to sharing our data after we've done the second phase of our change initiative.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Joshonda Gurrier from the Division of Clinical and Community Services. I want to begin to talk about the initiative that Melanie previewed for you all that basically reflects our work with regards to integrating the national class standards in all of the contracts. And so we definitely appreciate the partnership that we've been able to enjoy in working with our contracts and grants division. And so while the concept of class standards is not new, it is definitely an opportunity for us to revisit good work and really serve as technical assistance to our community providers. And so our division under the leadership of Tim Marshall has developed a tracking tool that we are using as our guide to really look at who has an active health equity plan Who then do we need to work with to ensure that they are embedding their principles throughout their organization and actually engaging in this work? Because there's one thing to amend contracts, it's totally different to actually put action behind those words that are in the contract to ensure that folks are doing what we are encouraging them to do. And so we are already starting to see some progress as a result of leveraging that actual tool. We see that the buzz, if you will, is occurring through the organizations where service managers are now sharing this need and going to their clinical managers are going to their executive directors. And so when you begin to hear this threaded through the leadership multiple places, then you begin to actually effectuate change in a meaningful way. So from a data standpoint, what we now know is as a result of those amendments to the contracts, we've had 9 additional community agencies who have either developed or are in the process of developing their racial justice health equity plan. And there's been a total of 276 unique individuals who have participated in a total of 4 different class-related trainings. So we're very excited about this work, and we know that there is great opportunity for us to continue to thread the needles and be a support to our community providers to do this very important and significant work. Thank you. So thank you for those of you who are working on those really important key outcome. It's wonderful to see leaders all across the system. So we want to check in again. And I'd like to revisit this question on these last couple of results that we looked at. How likely do you think it is that we will be able to achieve these outcomes within the next 2 years? Okay, just another couple of seconds. So I think we were even higher this time on folks feeling very or definitely sure that we'll be able to achieve these outcomes within the next 2 years. So I'm going to turn it over now to Tina.
Hi, everyone. Hi again. I don't know about you guys, but as we move into key result 7, I shared with the team that my heart is just smiling. I am just so thrilled about the work that's happening across the agency. And I don't know about you, but, take a pause and just reflect for a moment about where we've been over the last decade. This is the first time ever that we're hearing from leaders, not just across regional offices, not just across regions, but all 14 offices in every division of this agency. This is monumental. This is historic. And as the commissioner indicated, you guys just don't realize that you're leading this work, not just in Connecticut, but in child welfare across the country. So I'm applauding all of you as we move into key result 7, because as we all know, it is imperative that the race equity work doesn't stop with just the youth that are in our care, but also the young adults that are transitioning successfully out of our care under the leadership of Dr. Linda Dixon, as well as our educational division. Equity in education is extremely important, not just in the child welfare community, but in the country. So with that, I'll turn things over to Linda. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. In transitional supports and success, we have 3 of our efforts organized across our 3 largest offices. So we advocate for all transitional age youth to have better outcomes. We know that youth of color are overrepresented across all of the adolescent areas that we touch, from the overall cohort of youth 16 to age 23 to those served in our temporary settings and young adults sent to correctional facilities. Hopefully, all of the efforts upstream will reduce the number of transitional age youth in care over time and reduce the overrepresentation of youth of color in the adolescent cohort. So we have multiple avenues to make an impact here at Central Office. I'll put out a few. The central hub of our team's work is the Adolescent Shop through our friend Latasha Johnson. Think of the sphere of influence. We focus on policy and overall practice approach here at Central Office, but we try to find the pathways where we interact directly with youth and families. This excites the team, this motivates the team, so we chose a few areas where we have direct interaction with youth and families. As part of the vital approach to the work, we've implemented opportunities to ensure that youth of color are represented, visible, and heard in all leadership and advocacy spaces. We've created paid opportunities to lift the voice of youth of color in consultation and in policy shaping. The positions are everywhere in the department: ambassadors, writers, and consultants. They're competitive positions, and the voices are captured in the documents we've prepared to shape this part of the system. Also in this book of business, we're supporting tailored opportunities for youth of color within domains associated with adult success. So an example is a program that offers training and job placement to adolescent girls of color in the IT field. Also in this shop, we use 59 congregate care programs that we have in the state. 55% of the arrests in congregate care settings occur in six temporary adolescent programs. These are the STARS, or the temporary shelters for teens. Sometimes there are old warrants, sometimes neighborhoods call the police, sometimes fire alarms get pulled, sometimes there's an altercation with peer. Restorative justice techniques are used widely and provide alternatives to punitive action. There's an ample body of research that supports its ability to reduce racial and ethnic disparities in discipline in school settings, for example. We have data that support restorative justice principles applied in a locked setting that we used to have in our department, reduced arrests and it reduced restraints. So we have some data to start the work. Arrests of youth who are Black, Hispanic, or multi-race, 65%. That's not proportionate to the racial and ethnic breakdown of the overall placement in STARS. So restorative justice training to STAR providers and local police began this month. Hopefully we can impact those numbers. We also have correctional liaisons. These positions originated years ago in the former ombudsman's office to ensure that youth committed on the CPS side had their needs met. This wasn't JJ work. We embraced it when it came over here. We know that DMC occurs at every single decision point in the Connecticut juvenile justice system. We're fortunate enough to be able to show up for youth at the front end of the system through JRBs and YSBs, and we can show up and try to help at the deeper end. We've asked ourselves, what can we do to help plan for youth when they're ready to exit? This cohort, youth who are in the Department of Corrections when committed to child welfare, has the highest risk of poor outcomes, the highest risk of homelessness. All 4 youth committed to DCF under age 18 currently incarcerated are youth of color. 13 out of the 17 SPM youth are youth of color. We now keep cases open. That's a policy change we were able to make with support of the executive team in the regions. Instead of closing the cases when youth are sentenced to over a year, the cases are kept open, and we help support youth, plan for community reentry, and secure referrals. Our liaisons are trained up to offer now the permanency pact to young adults who are incarcerated. Dana Snell worked tirelessly to pull in 2 providers, train them up on the list. They're ready to start providing the list inside for young adults. Dana not only secured these providers to offer life skills, she worked with team members from the statewide racial justice group to revamp the list and include a section from the Black Lives Matter movement, the conversation on race and law enforcement. Our lessons along the way have been to think big and start small. Changes build incrementally. And we found that some areas that we didn't think would have an impact can really impact a young life. By way of example, just think of the moratorium on adolescents from care, exiting from care. TSS was just one small voice among others advocating for a moratorium on exits. We wanted that to continue throughout the pandemic. We know it's not easy to continue to relentlessly engage with the young adults who want to move on, even if they're not ready. This is consistent with a vital practice model approach. The executive team decided to support that and keep that in place until September. Why am I bringing this up now? because of the research on the potential impact. Child Trends 2017, extended foster care is just one tool to lessen the risks of adverse outcomes of youth aging out of care. Older Black youth in extended foster care have similar or better odds than their white peers in employment and educational attainment. The same holds true for older Hispanic youth. So extending care, even for a brief period of time, is a tool associated with decreasing racial and ethnic disparities in at least some outcome areas. This was an area that I didn't think would have such a big impact on a young life. We know we have a lot of work to do together, and I'll move it to my partner, Matt.
Thanks, Linda. Good morning, everyone. Just would like to highlight our REST work. As mentioned at the beginning of the summit, it's about access, and we know from our daily work that our challenges really are with the education system, really the system of inequalities, as we know in our daily work. We are very fortunate here at DCF to have an ed division of 12 seasoned educators who has specific skill sets and knowledge around the education system. And we know there are so many barriers for our students and families. There's so many exclusionary practices that our students and families face regarding school discipline. We know they disproportionately have adverse effects on students with disabilities, students of color, and low-income students. And Black and Brown students are especially vulnerable to being excluded from school as a result of implicit bias within the classrooms and the hallways of our schools across the country. So to have really who I call our equity warriors, our REST team, to really have a hands-on approach to welcoming our kids into our care, assessing their school records, assessing their needs, challenging the disciplinary practices that have kept them out of school, right? We know that students who haven't been expelled or suspended are as much as 10 times more likely to drop out of high school, experience academic failure and grade retention, and hold a negative attitude and face incarceration. So having, and we've seen the numbers decline, right? The numbers of referrals, it's not just even prior to COVID, suspensions and expulsions have been declining to the work of our General Assembly and our policymakers and us. So we're very proud of that work. And the next level is to really close the achievement gap, right? And make sure that our students are properly identified, that their needs are getting met, that we're removing the barriers from enrollment and transitions, and just ensuring that our kids and students have a quality education, for their rights and their responsibilities. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Before we move on to another really exciting section of the work, we want to check in one more time here and get your thoughts on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being they don't help at all, to 10 being these are essential to help us achieve our goals. How much do you think these initiatives support our workforce in addressing disparities and achieving our racial justice goals? Okay, just another couple of seconds here for anyone who wants to join. Wow, take a look at this. We have a good group of people, over half, who are at 9 or 10. And if we add in the 8s, we're up to about 75% of you think that that these are effective in addressing disparities and achieving our racial justice goals. So I will turn it to Monica.
Thanks, Susan. So for the better half of this morning, we spent a lot of time listening to all of the change initiatives that were aligned with the 7 key aspirational goals. What we have next is an area that is just as important as the outcomes and the outcomes that we achieve with those aspirational goals. So now we're going to move it a little bit different to the impact on the workforce and the racial and ethnic pathways. So that's the disproportionality pathways that all of you see during the presentations. We include it in everything, right? We referenced it in when we kicked off the anti-racist framework last year and said, these are also our report card, and these are the areas that we need to move. The aspirational goals oftentimes works and deals with the children that when they come into care, whereas the disproportionality pathways data is really at the front door, well beyond and what's coming in. And so you'll hear from our external strategies that are occurring. You'll hear from just strategies that are still occurring inward as well. We have legislation, we have Middletown Area Office, CT Kind, Office of Community Relations, Implementation and Development, Office of Communication, Labor Relations, HR Business Partners, and the Academy. And so you guys are also, we'll hear all of the great work that is being done in these areas. We'll start off with Vinny.
Hi, good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vinny Russo. I'm the Legislative Program Director here at DCF. And I just want to say it's been wonderful this morning to listen to all of you. And I can't tell you how helpful it is for me to be able to share these initiatives when I'm talking with policymakers at the Capitol and not just legislators, but obviously our partners in the executive branch as well, when we can share and strategize about how we can move this important conversation forward. But more specifically, within our division, we were talking originally about presenting the anti-racist framework presentation to legislators who have interest, particularly the Black and Puerto Rican caucus. And we have not done that at this point because of the busyness of schedule. However, it occurred to us that over the last couple years, a lot of our work at the legislature has to do specifically with a focus on racial justice initiatives, whether it's Monica's racial justice report that we submit and then I distribute to all the legislators, or just the conversations that the commissioner and I and Ken can have with legislators about these initiatives. So I just wanted to touch quickly on a few key things that have occurred. So as you can see, we have a picture here of the commissioner with Rep. Robin Porter at the signing of the Crown Act, which is the creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, something that the commissioner represented the administration on with her testimony, and therefore she was invited to the signing of the bill. She also participated recently in a press conference regarding racism as a public health crisis. One of the few invited by the administration to attend. So it's obvious that our voice is definitely loud when it comes to really pushing for these changes. So we did have legislators attend our anti-racist framework presentation. When we presented to the statewide advisory council, we had about 2 or 3 that were there that were very involved and interested in the topic. We also invited them to participate in our Color of COVID webinar earlier last year, which was very well received as well. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we do bring it up when we have these discussions with legislators. But specifically this year, we have submitted testimony with a framework of our racial justice work. And so you see these 4 bills listed here. Obviously the Crown Act bill, which I talked about in regards to the press conference and the bill signing. But we also submitted testimony on the governor's adult use of cannabis bill with a specific focus on the disproportionality that those laws have caused to people of color. In the Human Services Committee, they are currently reviewing a bill, fatherhood bill, Senate Bill 912, which is looking to provide additional funding to enrich the fatherhood work of the state. We were able to really highlight the work we're doing and talk with the committee about all the important initiatives that are occurring within DCF to engage with fathers. It was very well received. They were not aware of that work. And actually the Human Services Committee is voting on that bill today with a change in the language, which I expect will be very favorable for the department. More to come on that as the bill progresses. And lastly, we are part of the Trafficking in Persons Task Force. And they have a bill this year that we worked on over the last couple of years to really highlight key provisions in the statute to make it easier to prosecute human traffickers, particularly traffickers of children. And we do talk in our testimony, again, about what we see through our Careline reports and through our efforts through Tammy Sneed in that office about engaging and providing services to those youth, and how many of them, again, are children of color. So with that, I think, we are making strides. Obviously, all of our legislative and policy work, this is definitely always a focus, and we will continue to do that. Thank you.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Lisa Sedlock. I'm from the Middletown office. Really excited to talk about our change initiative. As we looked at our pathways data, we know what jumped out at us was a disproportionate amount of substantiations of Black child victims. The data showed that Black child victims were substantiated 6 times more than Caucasian children. So what we decided to do was we put together a multidisciplinary team in our office to really start to look at substantiations in real time. So not to look back, but to do them in real time and really struggle with looking at our decisions. So on our team are members of our racial justice team who kind of alternate in and out. And we have an RG staff member. We have the staff involved in the case, the actual investigation, myself, and we have our principal attorney who is also a member of our racial justice team and is, a real key member of the team to help us look at, again, substantiation decisions. So what we did was we took the racial justice tool that a lot of different teams are using, and we adapted it to look just at this decision point, this point in the case. So we're looking at the definitions, we're looking at the actual report, the type of report. We look at risk and safety assessments and how they came out during the investigation, and we're seeking to look at trends related to the sources of our reports, the types of reports that come in. We're looking at geographical areas of the families that we're investigating, especially in Middletown, where they tend to come from a certain couple of neighborhoods. We're looking at the equity influencers in terms of the socioeconomic and the educational, the housing, the criminal justice factors of the families and the parents that we're investigating. And again, as we're rolling out the implicit bias training, really trying to embed that into our discussion, looking at implicit bias of our reporters and of ourselves. And I can't help but think about what Jody talked about early on, this cultural vulnerability. You talk about, like, this kind of screams that to me. It's a data point, of a small group in our office that does the investigations. Our team is small, our numbers are small, so it takes some real critical looking and thinking at our work. So discussion and learning to date, we've actually done 4 reviews so far. The substantiations we have found to be appropriate substantiations, but it's excited us to really look deeper at what's, at our work. And so we're already wanting to make plans to collaborate with our community. We found that there's certain people who report that we have relationships with, the school system, the police department, the hospital, Middlesex Hospital. So wanting to collaborate with them and share our thoughts, our data. And excuse me, when it comes to implicit bias, I'm really lucky that we are going to be partnering with Tracy Davis in the Academy to, roll out, as we roll out the implicit bias training, let's look at how is it being implemented? How is it being used? how can we embed some of our questions in our reviews to get at it a little deeper, a little more, and look at how that impacts decisions and you know, where we go from with the case. And we've, you know, looked at some of the discussions have been energizing. The staff are excited to talk about their clients, are excited to talk about how they want to empower them, how they want to support them, and advocate for them. And you know, we've also looked at how can we treat this case differently? You know, we may have had legal sufficiency to file petition. Maybe we're not going to file petition. We're going to look a little deeper at how can we engage with this family? How can we build trust? How can we find the right services to not have them embedded deeper into our system and have a case open longer than it needs to be? So a lot of exciting things. And I'm really excited about it. I think the staff are, and I look forward to reporting again. And hopefully we're going to be moving the needle. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So I just want to talk a little bit about the CT-KIND Racial Justice Change Initiative. We want to advance racial justice and equity through technology. So what we want to do is build data points and fields to support staff in making data-driven, consistent decisions, regardless of race and ethnicity, notwithstanding the importance of race and ethnicity. We want to have a more robust reporting functionality and decision points to avoid implicit bias and assumptions regarding how families of color are experience DCF in comparison to others. And we also want to identify other areas that DCF and community partners should focus on. Where are there disparate numbers? Where is there disproportionality? You know, we really want to do a deeper dive into and get under the surface of the data and be able to configure our own reports, whether it be for your own, sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that. Whether it be for your own reports in your unit, whether you want to see, let me look at a family of color versus a white family, and let's compare how we've approached these families and how we've serviced these families. We've also looked at cross-training our technical staff. We've been doing a lot of training. They did the implicit bias training as well, so that they have a better understanding of what they're developing. And looking at things in real time as opposed to having batch processes, so that we will know right away of certain things. We are also looking at state and federal data points to make sure that we are collecting this information and that we are looking underneath service provision and doing community outreach whenever necessary. I remember years ago when I was in the Bridgeport office, there were 2 hospitals, and one hospital would predominantly refer high-risk newborns of parents who are of color. And then we had to do outreach back then because there was such a discrepancy that we did do outreach with them to try to get under that information. We want to have required fields that will not allow you to go further if you don't answer that question, and firewalls so that we don't miss or have inaccurate data. And again, we want to share, once we have our data exchanges, we want to share across agencies that are serving our families and to promote and achieve racially just outcomes. And again, this is really an overarching system overhaul that we're doing. There are certain things that we might want to look into further. For example, fatherhood engagement. You know, are we engaging fathers of color as often as we are of white fathers? So there's certain things that we can really delve into and report out on that could really enhance the pathways data as well. Another area that, you know, that we would want to tackle is are more families of color homeless? It goes on and on. Are more children in placement? And again, we want to be able to drill down to all of these different data points to make sure that we are not only looking at this and looking at disparity, but doing something about it. And I think it's important for all of us to be involved with that, and including, you know, our technical division and an understanding of why this is important and why we need to move this work forward. And so more to come on that. We would like to have, we will be reaching out to some of the different divisions and coordinating with Monica to maybe have some focus groups and get your feedback in the future. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? It's good to see everybody and see all the hard work that everybody's doing. I'm hoping that you can see me. I can't see myself, but I just want to say to everybody that this team is amazing, and it's the hard work everybody's doing. Hopefully will get us all to be more just and hear our callers and our families' voices. Our office is hopefully able to do the support and be a barometer for the work that's going on. Just to remind everybody, we're now capturing the race and ethnicity of all the folks that are calling, and there's an open case. We're not gathering this information on the informational calls, but the cases that are opening. And it's been very interesting because we've had the data that we've been getting is the numbers are low. We're hoping to be able to get more numbers, but what we're finding is that we're going to be able to pick up through the area offices and statewide and region on specific levels. And what we found so far is that there's a higher number of whites making the call on these folks that need the assistance. There, one of the problems that we're having is that, that we found that we have 66% of our callers are calling on families of a white race, and that's been a big surprise for us. So we're looking at the issues of why are more white families asking for help and reaching out to us. Does this mean that there's some need to build more trust? Is there access and engagement issues? And one of the things that we're going to be looking at is who is calling, the contacts, the reason for the call, and dive deeper into the data to find out what we need to do. Our staff is paying close attention to how we can engage our callers and really try and get to the reason for the call and try and build that trust and try and engage more. That information will be able to be gathered and given to the area offices so that they can really look at who's calling us. Really appreciate the time and the opportunity to talk about this data and share it all with you so that we can all improve our practice across the board. Thanks. Have a great day.
Good morning, everyone. So from the labor perspective, we decided to, am I early?
You're a bit early, Erin.
Oh, okay, I thought Jody wasn't on today.
Nope, Jody's going to be doing Jody's slide.
Okay.
Thanks.
But you could stay there because I'm going to be quick, and you might have some words of wisdom along with Dr. Taylor. If you see fit to unmute, please do so. Jody unexpectedly could not be here today, but Jody, along with Aaron and Dr. Taylor, have been our just leaders in collecting the data around our staff positives for COVID-19. And I can't tell you what a tremendous job the three of them have been doing. You all know that our safe and sound model actually was catapulted after the COVID-19 pandemic started in March because we were really keen. We were very much emphasizing our efforts to make sure that our staff were safe. that we created the infrastructure and the policies and the procedures to make sure that our staff stayed safe, and that we were equally emphasizing the need to do our mission critical work. That was no easy task. And so we set up this infrastructure to triage all of these cases, make sure we did contact tracing, and the numbers of staff impacted by this pandemic is tremendous. We early on were collecting data around race and ethnicity. And what was interesting is that what was happening in the community, in that there was a disproportionate amount of people of color testing positive for COVID, was actually mirrored what we saw inside of DCF with our staff and also our foster parents as well. So we are paying very, very close attention. To date, we've had 353 staff test positive, as you can see from the chart. We had our high peak there in January of this year. We are trending, we haven't haven't leveled off all the way. We're ticking up just a little bit, and we are looking to continue to disaggregate that data by race. And also, we're going to be tracking some data around staff who are getting vaccinated as more of our staff choose or not choose to get vaccinated. So we want to spread the word so that our staff make informed decisions about taking the vaccine, because we know that in Connecticut and across the country, there is disparity among people of color who are actually having access to and are taking the vaccine. So this is very much on our radar, and just know that within this division, we are taking critical notes on how we are communicating to our staff of color and to all of our staff around this COVID-19 vaccine. So now you can go, Aaron. Oh no, Office of Community.
That would be me. I guess this is Gary Kleeblatt. I'm the Communications Director. Hello to everybody. Real pleasure and honor to be part of the conversation in the Office of Communications under the leadership of Kendi Meisegland, and with the direction set by our commissioner, who's always talked about telling our story our way. The Office of Communications is focused on using all the elements of communication to support our emerging identity as an anti-racist organization. So what are those elements? They're images, they're stories, they're messages, and we harness all of these elements to demonstrate our belief and faith in the strong families of color that we serve and the strong staff of color that help us do it. Images are extremely powerful. We only have to think about the images of the Birmingham police using vicious dogs to try to control civil rights activists, or the horrible imagery we've seen of the Minneapolis police officer with his knee on the neck of George Floyd, to know how powerful images are. So fortunately, with the help of all of you, we get lots of images of families of color who are doing a wonderful job supporting their kids and keeping their kids safe and loving those kids. We do that by getting stories from you guys. Thank you so much for those stories about fathers reunifying with children, mothers keeping their children despite obstacles, just all sorts of wonderful stories depicting the strength of our families of color. And when we get those stories, we also get images. We get photos that are supplied by the subjects or that we take ourselves, so we can adequately present the strength of the families that we serve. Thank you so much for those stories that we then put in our Spotlight newsletter that goes to legislators, the media, governor's office, get a lot of great feedback from the governor's office and from other state agencies, as well as the people that were writing the stories about themselves, which I think is really, really important. And the messaging that we use, even when we're called by reporters who are asking us about fears of children being endangered because they're being left alone with their families during COVID. You know, we turn that around and we talk about our faith in families and the strengths that they have, and our belief that children are best served in families, and if families need help, they can get that help in the community. So, you know, that's our way of really pushing back on this deficit focus that we think is really unfair and inaccurate. So I am pleased to be part of this effort where, under the leadership of Ken and the commissioner, we're able to depict our faith in the strength of families of color, and we've got more work to do, and keep sending us those stories. Thank you.
Okay, my turn now. So from the labor relations perspective, we decided to focus our initiative on unsatisfactory performance appraisals for people within the P2 bargaining unit. So that would be our social workers, our social work supervisors, and our case aides. And so under that union contract, an unsatisfactory performance appraisal would have ramifications for the employee, obviously. For example, the inability to transfer, potential denial of an annual increase, impact on promotional opportunities, and if the employee had 2 successive unsat service ratings, that is just cause for dismissal. So we began our data collection with the 2019-2020 service rating year. We had 7 employees who received unsats that year, 6 female, 1 male, 5 white folks, 1 Black, and 1 Hispanic. And our overall DCF population data is not as granular as we'd like it to be at this point, because we are looking at the entire DCF population and not just P2 membership, but it does give us at least some idea. And so when we look at that, our population is 75% female and 25% male, with about 48%, so almost half white, 29% Black, 18% Hispanic, and 5% other. So when we look at that, our unsat performance appraisals really are in line with what we'd expect based upon the DCF population. But then when we look down to quarterlies, we see that that's not really in line with the overall DCF population. So if you're not familiar with the P2 contract, we do issue quarterlies to correct behavior that's less than good throughout the performance appraisal year. When we look at the first and second quarter, we see that more quarterlies are being issued to people of color and to men. So we'll continue to look at the data for the 3rd and 4th quarters of this appraisal year. And then we'll look at the unsatisfactory appraisals issued in September. When we do that, it'll be interesting to see if we can make any observations about the quarterlies. So are these quarterlies meritorious? If they are they actually correcting less than good behavior? And if they are, is that actually an anti-racist tool for our offices in order to use these tools to correct the less than good behavior prior to the unsatisfactory performance appraisal? We look forward to the continued partnership between area office leadership, supervisors, HR, and labor as we try to answer these questions. Thanks.
Monica, is it my turn?
Yep, you're ready to go.
Thank you. I should say, is it our turn? So our racial justice, let me back up a little bit. For those of you who may not be aware or remember, I have been the interim ODE director since November. And so I, for our Racial Justice Initiative, will be partnering with Suleiman Avery from Human Resources. Our Racial Justice Initiative was born out of Nedra Malay's land presentation. As part of her research, Nedra focused on the department's exit questionnaire and process. She found out that of 573 employees who left the department for a variety of reasons, only 39 employees completed the survey. And so within those 39 questionnaire, Nedra found that there were about 81 different reasons listed, ranging from communication, workload, expectations, to fair and equal treatment, fairness or lack thereof in disciplinary matters, et cetera. So there's a whole range of reasons for people leaving. The percentages as they relate to race for those separations were pretty consistent. They were about overall 50-50. But when you start looking at the specific reasons for people leaving, there you start looking at, you know, resignations, for instance, of those people that resigned and or transferred to other agencies, because those are considered resignations. Also, about 55% of those people were people of color. And so what we learned from the data was that while we've had an exit questionnaire that's been in existence for years, the significantly low number of employees responding to it is indicative of the need to revamp and market it so that we get better data and assist us in determining trends, inclusive of any that may be particularly impacting staff of color, and ultimately, you know, increase our staff retention. So moving forward, we will be working collaboratively with the HR team to revamp the employee questionnaire form. It's a little outdated, so we want to automate it, make it electronic, an electronic filing. And we also want to really establish a comprehensive process that, number one, lets employees know well in advance that this exit questionnaire is forthcoming and the importance of completing it. And then a process to have a one-to-one exit interview. So, you know, maybe something where we actually set up a date. And, you know, while we can't make it mandatory, I think once people have a date, it's been my experience that once people have a date with an exit process, as an exit interview process, they tend to be more apt to participate. And so things like that, we will be working on a process. We'll likely be putting together a work group that will include, obviously, our customer service base, which will be our employees and our managers and supervisors. And looking forward to that work. I think from, you know, my experience in the HR field, I do appreciate the opportunity to assist the department in an administrative way, but the impact of what we do as, you know, the Office of Diversity and Human Resources to the kids of our that we serve. I appreciate the fact that the department understands and embraces that and has included us in this process. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, almost afternoon, everyone. So from the Academy standpoint, we wanted to focus on this idea of a statewide implicit bias training. So starting in January, or actually late last year, we put staff through a train the trainer session. And this is credited to Jen Rondini, Shanika Hernandez, Christine Rivera, and Dyshawn Thames, who really stood up the process, and they were able to train 50 trainers across the state, who then took this information back and began to train their respective offices, divisions, and facility units. To date, over 108 sessions have been held with 1,600 staff completing the training, and we hope to complete this by the end of the summer. The intended impact really helps us to look, or we want people to look at identifying and understanding their bias and the impact that it has on service delivery to the families and children served. And sitting sitting back this morning and really listening to the other presentations, I heard very clearly from several area offices and a couple of divisions that in their discussions around cases and service delivery, this notion of implicit bias really rose to the forefront and allowed staff to engage in an open and honest dialogue that supports our safe and sound model. So I really do think anecdotally that the training in of itself is making some impact and helping us to move the needle. Through our evaluation process, some of our preliminary qualitative data shows us the following responses: that people have become more aware of issues, now always questioning if this family lived in a different town in Connecticut, would this have made a difference in my outcome or in my decisions? Or had the family had a different color skin, will we be making the same decision regarding this family? Staff are having more discussion about disproportionality and race with regards to service delivery and case dynamics, and firewalls are being created to review cases formally and intentionally looking at this information from a racial justice lens to address the implicit bias and other inequities. We have developed a pre-test, a post-test, or a pre-survey, post-survey, and impact survey. And that data, we are in the process of partnering with St. Joseph's University to go through our IRB process to be able to gather this data more formally, to be able to develop the research from that, and hopefully at some point be able to publish an article that will highlight the work that's been done around this particular training. And please be on the lookout late summer, early fall for focus groups that will be tapping people on the shoulder to participate as they've gone through this particular training. So I'm excited to see where we land. I'm excited to see how ultimately these discussions and the awareness that staff are gaining internally and having talks amongst their peers, how that's helping to move the needle to address concerns or issues around disproportionality and disparate treatment that is given towards our families and our children. So thank you for this opportunity.
You will be told that this is not a problem, not your problem. You will be told that now is not the time for change to begin, tools that we cannot win. But the point of the protest isn't winning, it's holding fast to the promise of freedom, even when fast victory is not promised, meaning we cannot stand up to police if we cannot cease policing our own imagination, convincing our communities that this won't work before the work has even begun, that this can wait when we've already waited out 1,000 suns. By now, we understand white supremacy and the despair it demands are as destructive as any disease. Remember that rage is our right. It teaches us it's time to fight in the face of injustice. Not only is anger natural, but necessary, because it helps carry us to a destination. Our goal has never been revenge, just restoration, not dominance, just dignity, not fear, just freedom. our fire can no longer be fueled by fearing. We will be fortified by this faith, found in the vow, the anthem, all Black lives matter, no matter what. Lives are worth living, worth defending, worth every struggle. We must stand up for all of us in our aims, united through protest and pain, amplifying women, the LGBTQ community, and people with disabilities, because none of us are free until all of us break our chains. We owe it to the fallen to fight, but we owe it to ourselves to never stay kneeling when the day calls us to stand together and envision a land that is liberated, not lawless. We create a future that is free, not flawless. Over and over again and again, we will stride up every mountainside magnanimous. We will be protected and served by a force that is honored and honest. This is more than protest. It's a promise.
Wow. Wow. Whew. Wow. That was so powerful, and she is so powerful. This has been an incredible time together. We have good news for you. We're going to end early. And we just have a couple of closing remarks, and we couldn't let the day end without hearing from our Deputy Commissioner of Operations. So I'm going to cue Michael Williams up to maybe react to what he's heard and felt so far.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Jody, and good morning, afternoon to everybody. And my initial reaction is exhaustion, like, wow, this is a lot. But you know what? What I've learned in my lifetime is that it's perseverance and sticking to it and being able to stay the course for a long time gets you the change that you're trying to get. There's a saying we say that we have adopted in our faith community. The race is not given to the strong or the swift, but it's given to those who endure to the end. And sometimes we just get tired and give up, but it's not the end. And so the end is what we are looking for, and we have to endure until that occurs. I'm so inspired by the operations team. I think all of them know that one thing I pride myself on is making sure that everything we do is strategic and that it is purposeful and that we can look and see that it's making a difference. And what I've seen in all of these presentations are, critically designed strategic efforts to make a difference and to make a change. And we know it's not going to happen overnight, but at least it's got to start now. And I applaud you all. I will continue to be that critical conscious to make sure that you're reminded of these initiatives that you put forth and that they are going forth and that we're not relenting on them. I was so inspired with results number 2, as you all were talking about it, looking at the data, particularly for the month of March, showing that over 61% of our children who came into care in March went to a relative or someone they know. That's good news, and that shows that the efforts that you all have put in place in that particular result is working. So thank you, and it's been a great day, and I look forward to our next event where we will have more updates, but looking at the data that shows that our efforts and your efforts are paying off. Thanks, Joe.
Speaking of data, we are so fortunate to have Trina Mazzata as our Bureau Chief of Strategic Planning. And, you know, she's been writing copious notes and texting back and forth with the commissioner. And so we wanted to kind of hear her voice on that data that Michael was referring to. So Trina, would you kindly unmute and give us a couple of remarks?
Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks, Jody. And yes, the commissioner and I were going back and forth because as I was so thrilled to hear all of the information being presented and also being able to think about other ways that we can assist through the Bureau to help the regions and our other supportive divisions to get additional data that they need. You know, we joke at times on executive team that sometimes the data world has felt so lonely. And I have to say, in all of my time with the department, this is really the first time that I have sat in a summit, and really, I don't think any one person presented or provided comments that weren't connected and based in data. So again, it's really, I think, an exciting time for the department. We heard about initiatives that have been informed by data. We heard about strategies also informed by the data that was reviewed and results that we're looking at as evidenced by the data. And so our work in strategic planning through QA, QI, performance management is really going to be to continue to support the efforts of all of you. I also want to echo some of what even Elizabeth mentioned around connecting the dots. And for many years, we've talked about in the agency, we've put a lot of pressure on the area offices and CPS and improving outcomes for children. And really what I hope everybody has heard today is that it's really not just child welfare in our area offices, it's the supportive divisions, and it's also the work of our community partners, our agencies, our services. And so while we continue to say and reflect on how we're doing and what will it take to achieve these results, we also continue to talk about who else will it take to be at the table. And so again, through our PIP, we've talked about expanding some of those strategies and working with our court partners. And again, all really informed by the data. We heard some talk about some of the manual reports being pulled. And so I've already followed up with my team around where are some opportunities where we can leverage our partnership with IT and tweak some of the reports, including those in ACR, to be sure to add race and ethnicity to the detailed data. So again, as you continue furthering your initiatives and looking at the data, if you come to what you perceive as a potential barrier or wondering if something is possible, please reach out to your quality improvement program supervisor, ACR program supervisors, and performance management to see, because certainly if there's any way for us to support you in that work and recommend changes or further inform the development of CT kind and what those reports will look like, we absolutely want to hear your voice and take those opportunities. Additionally, I will say in hearing the presentations from today, Nicole Dionis, who's the program director over performance management, and I were also talking about what are some of those measures that we may add to a monthly commissioner report. And so we'll be reaching out as well. Also talked about our Mindshare dashboards that are being developed and had additional ideas that we'll present in the meeting with them tomorrow to add onto those dashboards to, again, allow you greater ease in looking at performance on a daily basis. So again, really appreciated the work that everybody is doing, the connecting of the dots, and of course, the integration of data in everything that we're doing and looking at outcomes. So thank you all very much.
Feels like Christmas with that. Thank you so much to have the reports available to us to be able to inform our practice is so critical, and the partnership is evident. I'd like to just give Maureen an opportunity just to say hi and reflect.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say I started like at a 10 when I got into this meeting, and boy, from being here and listening, I'm just off the charts with hearing the great work that's being done. And what struck me throughout our time together is how much we've all adopted the language that I'm going to have to go back to Michael Williams when he first started talking about these aspirational goals and he would repeat them. There was so much of that I heard in the meeting today that it's part of our fabric now, that it's part of our fabric that we know that we want to keep children safely at home first. It's part of what we do every day, that we know our next preference is we want to look for people they know, for relatives. And each of the various presenters wove that in one way or another into their presentations. And I was just struck by how far we've come then, that it's not something we look at on a PowerPoint. It's not something that someone's teaching us or lecturing to us about. It's part of who we are. And I really appreciated that from the conversation today. I really want to give a huge shout out to Monica for her coordination of this effort with Jen and Tina. One of the things that was really helpful, and I'm sure it was to others, but particularly to my division, were those small clusters and really helping us work through where we are and where we could get to. Because I think it's overwhelming at first to think about this, but what you saw today is people have worked through it and come up with things that I know, Trina, I could hear Trina in my head going, oh, look at that, it's measurable. That's great, that's measurable. And that's a real change too, to see that how we're looking at it through that lens. So I just want to thank everybody for all the work that was so evident today, and to let you know how much I appreciated hearing across the department from everyone. So enjoy the rest of your day. Take time to get outside, please. It's getting nicer out there. Make sure you're breathing, taking good care of yourself, because we've been sitting for a long time. So make sure you get up and move a little bit. I'm good.
All right, thank you, Maureen. The comments were just so much reflective of the great work that folks are doing. I'm gonna have Ken unmute real quick.
Wow. Thank you for that. And it's a hard show coming after Maureen sometimes, so I'm going to do the best I can. So I guess it's good afternoon, everybody. We've all been together a real long time, but you know, as I was hearing about all this incredible work, what kept coming back to me was, as leaders, how we should always think about our legacy. And when we leave the agency or move to a different division, how have we improved that piece of work that we've touched? And, you know, we talk a lot in community relations about enhancing the agency's public value. And boy, I wish millions could have heard today the passion that we all had towards improving the lives of children and families with our change initiatives. And sometimes I think that the best change that we make affects people in a long-standing, permanent way, embedded in our work, in a way that those children and families who are benefit from that will never know our name. And I keep thinking about all of these systems, the work that's now embedded. These aren't things, these are ways of life now, ways of practicing, beliefs that we are not just enhancing our system with, but making a part of the whole agency. So there are kids there and families out there that don't know what we're doing, but already are in fact better off. And absolutely, as we continue our work and as we continue to bring in more community partners and help them enhance their work, the change that we have the potential to make here is just, you know, really unbelievable. So thanks to everybody for just such a great day so far, for your inspiration. We're already working hard on the communications ends to see what we can do with all this great information. Twitter's already blowing up with a couple of things that we talked about today. So just a great time, everybody.
Thank you, Ken. I just want to acknowledge once again, all of you as leaders. You are really doing an amazing job. You are carrying the torch. You are leading this agency by example. Congratulations to you all. I'd like to, we've talked about the racial justice, our leads, and Monica, who's amazing, along with Tina, who's incredible, and and Jen, who has just been our rock through all of this. I also would like to acknowledge a silent partner who is the wind beneath our wings, believe it or not, and that is Joanna. Joanna, can you please unmute? Are you there? I just want everybody to see her because she helped get this off the ground. She helped us with Zoom. She helped us, really just support all of our efforts. And you all should know her. I don't know, she probably is busy doing something right now, but would love for you all to just see her face at some point. Thank you, Joanna, for everything that you've done. I just wanted to really quickly just tell you that we welcome all voices. And so this has been an incredible energy that we have displayed here today. And we are all just excited about the future. Where there is hesitancy and where there are things that we need to understand a little better that might present as potholes. I'm mindful that some folks on the poll felt that the change initiatives and some of the work is not quite there yet. We also, in the spirit of safe and sound, need desperately to hear your voices come to life and create an opportunity for you to share your opinions. We have to welcome those voices because there are going to be barriers out there. And I would say share your concerns without fear of retaliation. And so that I'm putting that charge out there. So please, if you see things that are service barriers to this work, please feel free to reach out to somebody as a lead and let us know, to your respective supervisors and managers. You can go to the DCF Racial Justice box. We are going to be sending out an anonymous survey as a result of this. We need to hear your honest and authentic voice because we are all one team. And groupthink is not something that helps us to succeed. So it's okay. We really do need to hear the truth and your truth. Again, this has been an amazing couple of hours together. I'd like to have the commissioner unmute and say our final goodbyes, and we are getting you out of here at least a little bit over, maybe a little bit under a half hour early. Thank you.
Oh, wow, Jody, that was a big deep breath, Maureen, that I just gave there to close us out for this morning. Again, we took a risk. We took a risk several months ago to pause and say, DCF is really steeped in our racial justice work, and the things were bubbling up all across the country, and we knew we needed to do more. We needed to act, and we needed to focus our attention on the institutional changes that we seek. Initially, even the idea of all of these change initiatives sounded unwieldy. But what we decided to do is to take the PDSA model and understand what was in our sphere of influence, our individual spheres of influence, and refine them and measure them and identify metrics and really kind of focus in on the things that you have control over, and then incorporate into our whole performance management system of how we understand the work that we do. This was our toe in the water. This was our ability to, take a couple of minutes and slow ourselves down enough. I appreciated what we heard along the way of the leaders kind of saying, we're so much on this treadmill that we don't often give ourselves time to slow down and really look at what we're producing and how the people that are experiencing us have experienced us. And so, I thank the executive sponsor and Jody and the racial justice leads again for taking us through not only these exercises, but over the last year of guiding this ship in a way that elevates this work even stronger than we had been in the past. But we also still know that the change responsibility that we heard out there is ours to have and ours to move. There were 180 people at one point on this call out of 2,700. So the ripple effect is that leaders take this information and not only scale up your own change initiatives. Obviously, we won't incorporate all of them at the same time because it would be really too hard for each of you to have spheres of influence in other spheres of influence, but that's the ripple, the partnership I saw between a lot of you, the just reaching out and the wheels that I saw turning in the chat when you heard different aspects of this and how that impacts the cohorts that you have most that you most touch in your work. You know, the other thing that I think that came through loud and clear was that there are years of structural inequalities that people of color have been disenfranchised by. And, you know, some of those things that their white counterparts are given the benefit of the doubt on, they are not. And so the data that you sometimes look at might, you know, lead you to believe that we're asking you to leave children of color in unsafe situations. That could not be farther from the truth. What we're saying is those things need to be mitigated in an equity scale that allows for additional resources to neutralize some of that systemic marginalization over the years, and also apply the same lens that you do to white counterparts in really understanding the influence of our work. This is nuanced work. It's critical work. It's complicated work. It's heart work. It's head work. It's necessary work. So 6 months from now, we'll be back again. 9 months from now, we'll be back again. I want to hear how you are incorporating, scaling up some of those small end situations. Let us know how you're doing. Use the racial justice work mailbox to give us feedback, but also to ask questions and to challenge yourselves to go deeper and figure out ways that we can kind of get out of our own way sometimes to make sure that not only kids are safe, but that their families are thriving and their parents are supported. So again, I leave this with a heart bursting with motivation, but with more energy, because the work itself is leading us to this place that there's a point of no return. So thank you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for leading with passion. Thank you for leading with pride. And thank you for leading with purpose.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, oh, glory. Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapon. Formed against, yes, glory is destined. Everyday women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, his spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman and man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots be on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up. One day, when the glory comes,